to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name and address for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt this meeting, please either switch it to a silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'd like the Planning Commission Secretary to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Faison.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Ms. Malala Holly. Here. Ms. Parakis.
Here.
Mr. Rahman.
Here.
Mr. Roush.
Here.
Mr. Tagle. Quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Mr. Lambert.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to approve the agenda with one modification, to move item 7 in front of item 5, so that when item 7 would become item 5, and then item 5 would become item 6, and item 6 would become item 7.
Second on that?
A second.
Mr. Faison. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And now we have to approve the agenda as amended. Is that the next part of business or not? Or is that already taken care of?
Yes.
Okay.
The motion was just to move the agenda, so now you need to actually approve the amended agenda. Yes.
Great. Motion to approve the amended agenda. Mr. Roush. Ms. Malala Holly seconded. Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, who was the support?
Support was Ms. Malala Holly.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes from our August 10th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting? Go ahead. Mr. Faison, a motion, and Ms. Parakis seconds. Roll call when you're ready.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Roush.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item on our agenda is the public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Anyone from the audience would like to make a comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. It's our public hearing, conditional rezoning. A proposed Livernois Court, east side of Livernois, north of Big Beaver, 88-20-22-301-007, then 88-20-22-301-008, and 88-20-22-301-009, Section 22, from R1E, one family residential, to BB, Big Beaver Road District. Who's going to?
I will, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to take my mask off while I give the presentation.
Yes, very good.
Thank you. Tonight before you is a proposed conditional rezoning for the project that we refer to as Livernois Court. The Planning Commission has seen this 2 times previously. For a little background, the site is located on Livernois, just north of Big Beaver. There are 3 associated parcels with this application. Currently, all are zoned R1E. the request by the applicant is to conditionally rezone these 3 parcels to BB Big Beaver. Just for a little background in terms of what a conditional rezoning is, it's a process that allows the applicant to voluntarily place conditions on a rezoning. And I really want to stress the part about the voluntary. This can't be an action driven by the Planning Commission or by the City Council to put conditions. They have to be voluntarily offered by the applicant. If the conditional rezoning is approved, the applicant is bound to these conditions and they cannot vary from those approved conditions. In addition, if this conditional rezoning is approved, the applicant will move forward with a site plan, and we will review that site plan to ensure that it is consistent with the conditions offered by the applicant and the applicable standards of both the zoning ordinance and Big Beaver design guidelines. So I want to make it very clear to the Planning Commission tonight and to the public that we are not looking at a site plan per se. This is a conditional rezoning as part of the application. With regards to zoning, the site is outlined in red. As noted, it's R1E. There's a varied mix of both zoning and land uses as you go up and down the Livernois corridor. To the north is the senior living PUD, and north of that is the dog park, and then further north of that is a church. To the south is a mix of a church on Livernois, as well as single-family R1E properties. To the east is R1E single-family properties, and to the west is zoned community facilities. It's a park and recreation site. It's obviously the community facility center for the city. And then just kind of kitty corner or northwest of that site is another apartment development, also zoned Big Beaver. So as you can see, there's a very mix of uses and zoning along that corridor. The site itself is encumbered with some significant natural resources. This includes both regulated wetlands, floodplain, and trees. This map indicates the regulated wetlands. You can see it's outlined in kind of a bluish-greenish color on the screen. In addition, it's encumbered with both 100-year and 500-year floodplain regulations, as well as trees. So, with regards to the conditions offered by the applicant, they note that development will only occur in areas outside of the 100-year floodplain. That's indicated by that hashed line with the green is indicated area within the 100-year floodplain. I'll note that all regulated wetlands are also within that 100-year floodplain, so there will be no disturbance of the wetland area. They are proposing to preserve everything in that greenish area in perpetuity. The question that we're going to have for the applicant, and I'll get to that in the next slide, is what's their goals or what's their means to preserve that? Is it through a conservation easement, a land donation, et cetera? But in understanding with the applicant, that would not be developed and that would be dedicated in perpetuity for preservation. They did note there's a proposed parcel to provide a 40-foot egress. This was a condition of their previous application where they had not acquired the northern property. They have now since acquired that northern property, and so that that condition really is off the table because it's not necessary at this point. And the third one is there are a lot of uses that are allowed in the Big Beaver zoning district. However, they have self-regulated it so that they will only allow for multi-family unit development, and the buildings themselves will not exceed 35 feet in height. So we have 2 points of question for the applicant with regards to their condition. First, what does development mean? Does it include site grading within the 100-year floodplain and wetland? It doesn't indicate it from their plans, but we asked the applicant to confirm that notion. And secondly, how does the applicant plan on preserving that land? Is it through a conservation easement, a land donation, or other means? So we asked, again, clarification from the applicant about how they plan on pursuing that in the future. So I want to be very clear because there was a little bit of, I think, a misunderstanding from some of the residents as well as the general public with regards to what the applicant is actually doing on site. The area in green indicates that line of demarcation where they will not develop and will be saved in perpetuity. So those are areas that are outside or within the 100-year floodplain. Those will all be preserved in perpetuity by varied means. The area in blue outlined is a tree stand that will be removed. With regards to the site itself, that's the only area of natural resource that will be affected on that site, and it's a tree stand. But again, all the wetlands, all the floodplain, all the trees within the 100-year floodplain area, all that will be preserved as part of this development if these conditional rezoning is approved. The applicant has given us a conceptual site plan. This is for information purposes only. All access to the site will be via one point off of Livernois. There are no proposed connections to any adjacent properties or to any other neighborhoods. The applicant on their plan shows a 23-unit development. We note that the actual unit number itself, the layout can't be confirmed at that time, and will have to go through a full site plan review. There is a potential they would not get the number of units they're asking for, but again, that will be vetted through the site plan process. And lastly, if this conditional rezoning is approved, as I noted earlier, they will have to provide a site plan that will come before this planning commission, and it will have to meet those voluntary conditions as well as the zoning ordinance requirements and the Big Beaver design guidelines. So in summary, we find that due to the traffic, surrounding land uses, and limited developable area within the parcel due to the wetland floodplain, it most likely is unlikely that the site would develop as currently zoned single-family residential. Multifamily residential, with the applicant's condition to preserve that area as well as limit height, we do find that would serve as an appropriate buffer and transition to less intensive uses both to the south and to the east. And so we are recommend the Planning Commission consider the application, hold a public hearing, and consider any public comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Rahman.
I have two questions for Mr. Carlisle. Due to the traffic and surrounding land uses, the limited developable area due to the wetland and whatever is, why it should not be single family? Because by right, only single family is allowed, right?
So I think this is a good slide. You know, really, when you get down to it, there's very little area of this to develop. And
right, so that will be without cutting any trees.
Well, there's also floodplain and wetland regulations too, so some additional regulations on top of that. It makes it very, it does not make it impossible, it makes it very expensive to do development within those areas. Just due to the low yield you'd get with single family, it's unlikely that someone would go through the effort to put in single family with the low number of yield they would get from that. In addition, there's a pretty high traffic volume, so the single family homes themselves would probably have to be pretty close to Livernois, and so it's unlikely just due to the traffic pattern that people would put single family here. I'd also note that these two parcels have been undeveloped for a significant period of time under single family zoning and haven't been developed. So for those reasons, we just think single family is probably unlikely to happen at this particular site.
But the traffic situation will be worsened, right, if we get multiple families living in the same spot? Isn't it the case?
We have not done a full traffic study as part of this, but you're adding 24 units. Typically a multifamily unit has less traffic than a single family unit. So comparable, the amount of single family you get on there, the traffic may be comparable. Probably it would be safe to assume though that multifamily here would have a higher number of yield units obviously and have a slightly higher traffic yield. But again, I think you've asked a traffic engineer, and I'm not one.
Yeah.
The amount of traffic on Livernois.
This is just something to discuss or something to, obviously the Planning Commission is the recommending body. I'm not saying that we're going to make a decision, but this is something we need to, study before we make a plan. That will be my recommendation.
I just follow up, just one last comment. And again, the traffic study could be part of a site plan if it moves forward, or part of this if it's deemed warranted by the Planning Commission. I think the volume of traffic on Livernois itself, if you ask a traffic engineer, 24 additional multifamily would not have a significant increase on the amount of traffic on Livernois.
I have one more question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
You can go back to the other slide where you kind of demarked like the blue circles or blue region versus green region. The blue one is the ones where all the trees will be cut down, right?
That's the area where they're developing, so those trees would have to be removed.
So how many trees do you have a count? Or?
So we have a tree mitigation requirement in your ordinance. Based on that,
but how many trees was my question? So
we don't know that at this point because they haven't gone through the site plan process.
That's what I'm asking.
I'll tell you, the amount of trees that they're saving far outweighs the number of trees they're removing, as clearly indicated on the screen above you. The limited area of removal of those trees compared to the rest of the trees that they're going to be preserved.
Yeah, I went there yesterday. I was just showing some pictures, and I saw a deer. I have it on my camera. I can show it after the event, after this meeting. I feel like, there will be a lot of trees that we're going to remove, and this is really a nice, natural, locations, because I was surprised that you were saying that only multifamily can, be feasible. So, but that's something that we can discuss. I don't have any further question.
Anyone else? Mr. Hudson.
Brent or Ben, could you bring up the slide which shows the wetland areas, including that portion by anthology? Okay, that's it. So what we're looking at in this development is maybe a strip along Livernois, but all that in gray is preserved wetlands, or what some people are calling a forest.
Yeah, so the area here, so this is a wetland map. It's obviously not 100% accurate, but these are the general areas of wetlands on the site. All the areas that's indicated as wetland in the, this area is a wetland kind of line. This whole area would be preserved if this conditional rezoning moves
Has
forward.
anthology also preserved that
Yeah,
balance on the north?
This back area is also preserved.
Okay,
Yes, that is also preserved.
thank you.
Mr. Faison.
Two questions. So this will be limited to 35 feet, I think. What's the height of Anthology and also the homes to the south?
I checked, I anticipated this question because it was asked at the last meeting, and I was trying to find a good drawing in the last meeting, and I didn't answer it. 37 feet 9 inches to the top of the roof. For the assisted living facility to the north, 37 feet 9 inches.
R1E allows 30 feet in height. So the zoning district, underlying zoning district is 30 feet in height.
Thanks. And then the question on tree mitigation came up. So I think from your answer that the applicant would get credit for the trees preserved in the wetlands. Is that right? Per our ordinance?
On the side.
Yeah, so let me go. So as our mitigation plan works is you have to replace what you take out, but you get credit for what you're preserving. They have not done a full tree survey. My assumption, and this is an assumption, is that they're preserving far more trees than they would be taking out. So they would actually be getting a credit, and so they would not have to put additional trees in. If they did the tree study or survey and determine that they're taking out more trees than what they were saving and they have to replace, they would then eventually have to come in and put additional trees in. I think just looking at the general area, it's a significant amount of trees that are being preserved, and they would get credit for that because even though it's in the floodplain, even though it's in a wetland, they're still preserving it, and they still would count towards the credit under our ordinance.
I appreciate the thorough response. That was my assumption, but thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Yes, I have one question. How many different residential classifications are there between the single-family existing zoning class and going to the maximum in terms of density for residential?
So there's 5 different single-family designations, R1A through R1E. There are 3 multifamily. One is RT, which is one-family residential, MF, which is multifamily, and then UR, which is the urban residential district. Urban residential is the most dense of the multifamily alone districts, and then you have all the form-based districts, which allows multifamily as well.
And would you consider then, the way you described the last one, the urban residential, is that more or less intense in terms of the amount that you can build in a residential compared to Big Beaver?
In theory, it would be less because there is actually a density limit on UR, and there's not on any of the form-based districts, including Big Beaver. So in theory, it would be less.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else for staff? Go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you look at the zoning map, you see that Anthology, which we've already talked about, is Plan Unit Development number 14, which is just to the north of that. And I guess maybe this question might go more to Ms. Dufresne, but Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savin, I couldn't answer it. Does the fact that that PUD was created to the north of that create any kind of precedent for the fact that now we need to look at a more dense zoning classification for the property just to the south of it?
Do you want me to handle that, or do you want to handle that?
If you want to take a stab, I can jump in.
I mean, in general, Mr. Lambert, that's an excellent question. Were you a lawyer in a former life?
Never. I wanted to be one, though, in the previous life.
The fact that that's a PUD does not necessarily mean we have to reevaluate what the density levels for those surrounding, those adjacent levels are, adjacent properties are. But it does raise a good point. I mean, it doesn't set necessarily precedent, because PUD, conditional rezoning, there are two different mechanisms in our zoning ordinance. But it does raise an interesting issue about what the rest of that section of Illinois is going to look like. But no, in terms of setting precedent, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Savinant, you want to follow up on that? Sure.
So agree with everything Julie said. The property came on the market. We had a pre-application meeting with the applicant. This is some time ago. This is our third meeting that we've discussed this application. And we had dialogue about, the owners of, at the time, two of the parcels were interested in rezoning the property to something to make it marketable. And now over time, they've picked up the third property. But for our preliminary application, we actually talked about what district this should be to accommodate that type, the townhome type of development. And if you look at the zoning, I put the zoning map up on the screen, and there's a lot going on up there in terms of zoning. You've got the R1C, and then PUD, and across the street Big Beaver, and then CF, and environmental protection, and it's a mixed bag. And when you start to talk about the MF and the UR, we look at the master plan, and then we look at, if we introduce UR there's no UR within a significant distance, and it's somewhat of a spot zone. And what should it be? So, I mean, we went around and around on what the most appropriate zoning district should be. Now, the fact that the applicant voluntarily conditioned the density, the cap of how many units, I think helped, because the applicant's voluntarily capping it at 24 total units. So from that aspect, from a fit aspect, it seemed to make the most sense for Big Beaver, because there's Big Beaver located across Livernois, and we didn't go down the road of introducing a zoning district that's not anywhere near there. So, I mean, there was a lot of head scratching in terms of what zoning district this should be to accommodate that type of use. And at the end of the day, they settled on Big Beaver. And just to be clear, the role of the planning department and the planning consultant for this is to process this application. We're not the applicant, just to remind everyone in attendance watching on TV here. We're processing the application to rezone to Big Beaver because we received an application to process to Big Beaver. That's why we're having that discussion this evening. Our role is to process the application. The Planning Commission's role is to make a recommendation, and ultimately the decision goes to City Council for thumbs up or thumbs down. Can I piggyback on that, Mr. Chairman?
Of course. You can continue.
Yeah, so I want to be clear. So I think the planning department recognizes the importance of engagement and being transparent, and I think this Planning Commission that's one of their goals is to really encourage engagement. Not only in the master plan update process, but also day to day. We want people to be involved, and if people want to get involved in government, the level that you can make the most impact at is local government. I mean, I think that my opinion is it affects people's lives more than any other level, and it's the level that you can make change and you can become more involved and have an impact. So from the perspective of getting people involved and engaging, I think the fact that we received 100 emails is a good thing. It really is a good thing. And I want to ensure everyone that sent an email, every email was shared with the Planning Commission. I didn't make hard copies, because I didn't want to kill a lot of trees. But every email is on the laptops of every Planning Commissioner. They've got them in front of them. They've read them, and they've received them. And I want to ensure that they've got them. And I'm going to pass the hard copy around here as well. But before I do, I want to say this in a constructive and positive way, that there was some information that was provided to the neighbors related to this rezoning application, and it's got a lot of misinformation on it. And again, I want to stay on a level of constructiveness. in the future, if there's a rezoning application or there's an application affecting a neighborhood, please contact the planning department. We will provide, we'll be fully transparent. All you have to do is ask. We'll give you the complete application. Any information in the file, we will give to you. I'll email it to you. No charge, no questions asked, so that you've got the facts at your fingertips. Because there's a lot of misleading information in this pamphlet or brochure, or whatever you want to call it. And I recognize that the intentions were positive, but I don't think it was helpful to the process. I think it scared a lot of people. I think there was an implication that forest of trees, that 80% of the site that's being preserved was going to be clear cut. That's not the case. And just as we move forward and we engage and you get involved in the process, just give us a call, an email, and we're happy to help you. And I'm going to circulate this for everyone.
Very nice, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Malala-Holly.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Carlisle, can you give me an idea as to what is the site dimension that we're looking at here in terms of the entire wetlands and the proposed site development? I know Mr. Savidan said something like 8%. Is it 8% of the total area that we're looking at where the development is being proposed?
We have not done a calc. I mean, I don't have a precise percentage for you. I think this indicates a pretty significant amount of site will be preserved. The applicant should be able to answer that question because this is actually mapped out in CAD. So there should be a definitive answer that they can give in terms of what that area is as compared to the total area of the site.
Sure, thank you.
Anyone else before I bring up the applicant? Seeing none, the applicant would step forward and listen. We'd like to hear your story, basically, about your development. Is that the applicant walking in? Good. You're next.
Your timing is perfect.
It used to be.
That's what I was wondering.
I apologize. I thought it was the third one on the agenda, so
Yeah, I understand.
I got caught up by surprise
We
here.
moved you forward. If you would, please provide your name and address.
Aaron Nicola, Eureka Building, 5960 Livernois, Troy.
Thank you.
So this is the third time we're here for this conditional rezone. Pretty much what we have now with this updated application, we have the property to the north join our application, and now we have all the three properties joining together for this application. I was made aware recently that there was a few emails sent by the neighbors with regards to concerns regarding this conditional rezoning. I want to make sure that the main concern from the neighbors was conserving the wooded area. And this concern has been fully addressed with the condition in our conditional rezoning. So I wanted to make sure that's clear on the record because we got caught up by surprise a little bit in the past day or so with all these emails flooding us with this application. I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Anyone from the commission would like to ask a question? Seeing none? I guess we're fine.
Thank you. Sorry again.
Go ahead.
There were two questions in my report that I would like the applicant to answer, if possible.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So the questions are on the screen here. So one of your things says there'll be no development within the 100-year floodplain. What does development mean? Does that mean site grading within the 100-year floodplain?
So if you see, we have depicted a dotted line. That dotted line, basically, we're going to stay at least 10 feet away from the dotted line with silt fencing, and anything to the west may be graded, but anything to the east of the silt fence, 10 feet away from the from the depicted dotted line, will not be touched.
So there'll be no grading within the 100-year floodplain?
No grading whatsoever. We don't touch it.
And then the second question I had was, how are you planning on preserving that open space area? Are you going to do it with their conservation easement?
Conservation easement would work through our legal teams with the Troy attorney. We'll get this ready before the city council review.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Malala-Holly.
I'm just going to ask the same question that I asked Mr. Carlisle a couple minutes back. Can you give me an idea as to what is the size of this property that we are looking at? The developed area and the proposed
So
preservation?
in terms of a reference point, I think, if I understand this correctly, you want to understand how does the development portion of it correlates in relation to the adjacent properties and the houses.
You got that, yeah.
What you see there on the south side of the property, you see a couple of squares or rectangles. Those are the closest houses to the development. And in terms of distance, over 150 feet away to that first house, as far as distance of the development could be over 150 feet away from that closest house. So it's pretty far away from that house.
Okay. Then I have to ask you a follow-up question to that. From Livernois to the end of the wetland area,
Sure.
what is the entire area we are talking about?
In terms
And-
of size?
Yes, and what percentage of that land area that we are looking at is going to be the developed area?
Good question. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. So we have over 9 acres in total land size. 7.2 is conserved wetland. So we're looking at close to 2 acres of being touched as part of the proposed development. So we're looking at 80% ratio, 80-20. 80 being conserved, 20 being
I know we are not anywhere close to the site plan or anything, but do I understand this correctly that we will have approximately, you're looking at something like a 23-unit home?
This is, again, we will work with the Planning Commission in coming up with the best site plan feasible. We'll take your recommendation. This is just a quick sketch, just to give you an idea, but that's not to say that we can do 23 or 20 or 15, whatever that is.
So you're open to less dense?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I want to make that clear.
Absolutely.
That part clear.
Yes,
You're open to less dense development in the same area?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We will bring it here and we're open for recommendations.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Rahman?
I asked that question to Mr. Carlisle. Maybe we have the answer. So do you know how many trees need to be cut down to complete this development?
Yeah, there's going to be there's a requirement from the City of Troy, whatever trees we cut down, we have to replace depending on the size diameter.
No, I know that
In terms
from
of
that
the
standpoint,
number-
I know the calculation and there is no issue, but I'm just saying that literally how many trees will be cut
Off the top of my
down?
head, there's 7 trees of the size that would apply for replacement, 7 trees that would have to be.
No, that's based on the reconcilement with the amount of trees that we're going to save because of the wetland, right? But I'm saying literally how many trees need to be cut down? That's my question.
So the trees that we'll have to cut down in the area of construction will be around 7 trees.
Okay,
Depending
but
on
that overhead picture did not seem like that, right? Is that 7 trees?
I think,
of the size.
just clarify, so we have, within our tree ordinance protection, we have certain trees that don't qualify, dead, dying disease, invasive species, et cetera. I think what the applicant's telling you is there are 7 trees within the area that they're developing that qualify for protection under our ordinance. There may be more trees, but we don't count them because they are dead, dying disease.
Yes. No, I'm
too
just
small,
asking this
et cetera.
question because I have like to make sure that it's clear to everybody so that we can make we're not going to make a decision anyways.
So I think
because
what
when
you're
I
hearing-
went there yesterday, I was walking by, it looked very dense, like a forest type situation. So there was no sidewalk, I had to walk on the grass. But I'm just saying that it looked like you have to cut down. I mean, I even had hard time to understand how we can even fit in like one house there. It's so dense. Now we're going to have 24 apartments, so I cannot visualize only cutting 7 trees, you're going to be able to complete everything. But maybe you're right. I'm not disagreeing.
I don't think he's telling you he's going to cut down 7 trees. He's going to cut down more trees, but there's only 7 trees that qualify for under our protection ordinance.
And we will replace them. And we'll go above and beyond.
I'm sure you would, if we city council agree to that. No, that's just, thank you, I think.
Anything else?
Anyone else? Seeing none? I'd like to, later, the public comment will be soon to follow. Just one mention for staff. I noticed, the R1E homes to the south that are on Livernois, not within that development, the existing development, but the homes that are, it looks like one house is actually facing Livernois and directly to the north of that house, that's all vacant land. It surprises me, if that land's been vacant in Troy since Troy started in 1955, why hasn't anybody built a house there?
It's part of the church.
It's part of the church, okay.
If you can look at it, you can see there's a very kind of wonky property line. So this whole parcel is all part of the church parcel. And you got a few cutouts for single family homes.
Okay.
So I don't know what the church's future is with regards to potentially developing
That
or
answers my
not.
question. Appreciate that. Okay, all set. Then the next part is it's a public hearing. I don't see it. It's not a public hearing then, is it?
We've had 2 public hearings, but I would encourage the chair to invite anyone who wishes to speak on this item to the podium.
Technically, it's not a public hearing, but we'd like to invite you to come up, sign in. If there's quite a few, if you could form a line leading back from the lectern, that way we can expeditiously get to all your comments.
And Mr. Chairman, just for the record, we did, although it's not a public hearing, we did send a courtesy mailing to residents to inform them of this meeting.
Very good. So first one up, if you would, it's 3, we have a limit of 3 minutes. Thanks for reminding me.
3 minutes, I'll talk fast. My name is Joe Pellerito. I've lived in Troy for 45 years. I live on Trombley, right behind the path that goes to the dog park. So the first thing is, if you look at the floodplain map, it looks like the nursing home has encroached on that floodplain. What's the guarantee that'll never happen, that the applicant's not going to come back and say, well, they did it, we want to take 100 feet of that floodplain, and then 5 years later, we want to take another 100 feet. So that's one concern. That because it was allowed for the nursing home, what's to keep him from doing it later? Because all he's got to do is come back to the Planning Commission and say, I know we said that, but we've got more plans. My second question is, what's the square footage of each of these units going to be?
You have to direct you have to direct all your comments to the commission only.
Okay. Are these going to be luxury type apartments? Are they going to be single floor, multi-floor? What type of apartments are they going to be?
We don't have answers for that. This is a rezoning.
Okay.
That would be when the item comes up for a site plan, that's when all those details would be brought forward.
Okay, his comment was it's 150 feet from the nearest house. That's not all that far. My property is 150 feet deep. And so it's like, it's not that far. He's acting like 150 feet is an enormous distance between the edge of his development and the next house. That's pretty close. They have an apartment building 150 feet away from you. So I just want to make that. And then how many do you know how many parking spots he's going to want?
It's not part of this.
Okay. Just question ahead. And your comment about the misinformation that went out is entirely true, because the thing I had taped on my door said they were going to take out that whole area of all the trees when it's just a small amount. So I appreciate your comment on that. Okay, so that's my comments. Is the one thing is about, because they encroached on that space, what's to keep this from happening too? And I'm just on the way over here, I saw at least 3 deer just wandering through that. And as we keep chipping away at all this stuff, we're giving the animals in there less and less space. And so that's a big concern too. There's a lot of wildlife in there. Dozens of deer live in there, among who knows what else. But, okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I address the gentleman's question about the floodplain? A really good question, by the way. So the floodplain information that you see here is on the city's GIS system. I don't know if everyone knows what a GIS means, but it means Geographic Information Systems. And it's a way of storing and presenting information like spatially. So you have a base of aerial photography like you see here, and then you layer information below that. And you can pull up whatever information that you want to tell a story like this does. The floodplain information that we have is somewhat old. So what happens is, when we've got this general information that's probably approaching 20 years old now, and a lot of things happen in 20 years. But what we do is we ensure that when there's a site plan submitted, that the applicant hires a civil engineer and identifies accurately what the floodplain is. It may change over time. That's what happened with the PUD to the north. It hasn't happened yet with the property to the south. But I can assure you for this, what the applicant is doing is voluntarily conditioning, the fact that the line is going to be located where it is. So it's going to be tied to the property, that line that you see on the screen is not going to change. That's the line. So even if he hires a civil engineer during the site plan review, identifies the floodplain has changed and it's pulled back 20 feet, the line is the line. So that line that is ultimately approved by City Council is going to be the line, the demarcation line that Mr. Nicola talked about, that there's going to be a 10-foot distance, and there's going to be a silt fence, and that's the line. The line is the line. It's not going to change. Great question, though. So, yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I know that we shouldn't have a
I know
conversation
that,
like this.
yes. You're a little bit out of order, but we're going to let it slide this time. Go ahead, Mr. Burke.
The access to this property will be 100% via Livernois. There's going to be no traffic that goes through the neighborhood to access this property. None at all.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying it. And we're here to clarify things. That's our job at this point with the residents. So, next one up.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Deborah Black, and I reside at 3364 Livernois, and I am partial owners of that property with my brothers. We are in favor of the conditional rezoning, and I have 3 points to make why we're in favor. First, we feel it's a good fit for the area. It adds to the walkability and the short travel to several areas, including Big Beaver District, and it enhances the existing development along with the new development for the farmers market. It'll be inviting to people who want to live in Troy. Secondly, the decision to pass this rezoning is the right decision, not only for the city, but also for the landowners of the 3 parcels. Reason being, it allows the landowners to move forward and not be blocked in by a 50 to 500 year floodplain and wetlands. Thirdly, this development will also be attractive to the city residents because it will preserve the green space, a lot of green space, and the natural environment and wildlife to thrive. I've seen it. I urge you to pass the rezoning tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Mr. Chairman, I've got my stopwatch. I'm time.
So you're the timekeeper.
Yeah, we don't have the since
the system running.
We don't have the system running. So if it's okay, at about 2.5 minutes, if I say 30 seconds, and then at 3 minutes, I say 3 minutes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, if I remove my mask.
Oh, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much easier to see.
We're way more than 6 feet away.
Could you go to the map that has the...
First, your name and address.
Sorry, John Phillips, 3302 Frankton, Troy. Could you go to the map that has the proposed where they're going to take the trees out, the blue section? My question here, and I understand that, they want to develop, but why clear cut those trees? You're talking about aged trees. You're not talking about new trees that you're going to be putting back in, the 7 trees. We're talking old growth trees. There's a lot of natural wildlife in there that depends on that old growth trees. Bats are one of them. Bats are the ones that eat all of your mosquitoes at night. And I see them at night just as the light hits it just right. So I know there's a lot of natural wildlife. The more you take out of that wetlands area, the more you're affecting the environment that everything lives in. We have many different animal species in that area. Bats are just one of them. We have a couple cranes that fly in along the Pike Drain there. So that's one of my main concerns is when I saw that they were just everything that they could remove trees, they are playing on it. And there's so many times that you just see everything being clear cut, and then they put up the little trees, it's gonna take 50 years to grow back to what it was if it ever gets there. My second issue with this is the drainage issue. In this last year, we've had more flooding in our area than I've seen in the last 20 years that I've lived in Troy. Literally, it's gone up past my house to the next house's driveway, which I've never seen that before. So my other concern here is with the change in the elevation and the adjustment, how's that going to affect the rest of the pike drain, which has not been dredged or maintained in any way as far as I know. So that's my other concern on this. I understand that the property owner does want to sell and would like to rezone, and I wouldn't have a problem with it so long as they don't go back too far into what is considered the wetlands and the tree zone area. I understand that your policy is to replace so many trees with so many trees, but you also have to look at the age of the trees and their function in the environment. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. Next person, please.
Good evening. Let me take off my mask. My name is John Joe. I own the property at the 3316 Franklin Drive. And I'm here to voice the same concern as the previous gentleman has voiced, in the way that around my property, I see, flooding situation a couple of times in the previous couple of years, and things are getting worse. So I try to make sure that, if this resuming would have a study or if to make improvements of the flooding situation, improvements or make it worse. This is my concern. Secondly, I want to clarify that I'm not quite clear on the site plan as far as right now. So the house to be developed is inside the yellow area or is outside the yellow area? I'm not quite clear on.
This is not a question and answer. This is just public comment. So we're not here as a body to answer your question directly. As a favor, we'll break some of the rules and to allow the city staff at the end of all this, all the public comment to address some of your items.
All right.
Okay? So we'll get to, I'll bring that up as we, or someone else on the commission will bring it up. Okay. Your concerns.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Anyone else?
I can address a couple of questions while we wait for the next speaker.
Sure.
Just so I understand, the person who was just at the resident who was just at the podium here, what you see on the screen, you see the in green, which is proposed to not be touched, and then to the west of that, a max capacity, a max number of units. I believe it's 24 units. That's the area where the development would be. So the green is untouched. So I was looking when you mentioned your address, your home is over here. Yeah, so that's the closest extent of the development would be, as it relates to your house, would be here. Now, can I talk about
yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Drainage and flooding for a second?
Absolutely.
We've had a really strange year, a really strange summer in terms of rain. It seems like at least in my house it rained every night for like 2 months. It was really hot and then it rained a lot, and it just wasn't sprinkles, it was torrential downpour. So we've had you're not the only resident and the previous person who spoke who's had flooding issues or issues with drainage and et cetera. So there's a requirement, if the rezoning is approved, they'll be required to submit a preliminary site plan application. As part of the preliminary site plan application, they're going to have to show preliminary drainage, basically showing where the water flows in a very kind of general way. If the site plan is approved, their civil engineer will have to do a detailed engineering drawings, and they'll have to look at drainage. And there's a requirement that any development on this property cannot negatively impact abutting properties. So it can't, all the displaced water cannot go onto neighboring properties, cannot go into your property. It's going to be the job of the civil engineer, of the petitioner, if it gets this far, to design it. The city's going to review it and ensure that it does not negatively impact abutting properties. We now know, because at least 2 people have spoken this evening and other people have mentioned in emails, that flooding is an issue in that area. Now, I'm not a civil engineer and I'm not even going to pretend to be one, but it is possible that if and when this site is developed, that there could be improvements made that help assist this drainage issue moving forward. At the very least, the petitioner sitting here, he's read all the emails. He heard your comment. He heard the previous residents' comments. He's aware of the issue, and his engineer will be on notice to try to resolve, or at least at the very least design a development that's not going to exacerbate it and maybe help solve some problems.
Anyone else from the audience? Okay, at this point, I'd like to bring it back to the commission for comments, thoughts, and possible resolution. Go ahead, Ms. Parakis.
Yeah, I have a question. Am I to understand that the 3 conditions that the applicant is submitting are the 3, basically, that they're not going to build in the 100-year floodplain, that they're going to provide the 40-foot egress easement, and that they're going to limit the building to multifamily to not exceed 35 inches in height, and then there's a setback? Is that essentially? Because what we're doing is, what they're asking us anyway to recommend to City Council is to rezone it to the Big Beaver District, which is super broad. So,
well, it's super broad in terms of uses, and it's super broad in terms of form, but they're eliminating their uses just of multifamily, and they're saying it can't be any taller than 35 feet in height.
so it's the 3 things that I just mentioned, essentially. Those are the conditions.
Correct.
Okay, so the way I'm looking at it is, they can't really build in, if we didn't allow them to rezone it, they can't really build in that floodplain anyway. So the condition is, something that I don't know how helpful that is. And then obviously the main one that gives us some safety, I suppose, is the height requirement and the fact that it's multifamily. But I'm just going to be honest, the way I'm feeling right now is we have places all over Troy that are zoned in a way that permit multifamily buildings such as townhomes, and we just completed a survey with the City of Troy residents, and there was an overwhelming response that people don't want to see townhomes. So the idea that we're going to provide this as a permissible thing right now in an area that they can't do that, I think it's really premature, and I'm not going to support that motion, because I think that we need to take some time to first decide what we envision for that area before we rush into that. So I'm not going to support, an approval for this for those reasons. I think that we need to, I understand that the landowners are stuck because basically it's useless land at this point, and I understand that, but it doesn't, I don't want to feel that we're forced now to rezone, especially when we're being brought townhomes, which we pretty much, Troy is telling us we don't want townhomes. So there's nothing really interesting or innovative about the multifamily option that they're bringing us. I know we don't have a site plan, but there's nothing really that made me that interested that would convince me to recommend a rezoning at this time.
Mr. Hudson.
I appreciate Ms. Parakis' viewpoints. However, if we take a larger look at the overall properties along Livernois with colleges, large churches, an apartment house, a community center. No one in their right mind is going to build a single-family residence on this property. It's just inconceivable to me, and I think when events change and times change, we ought to be able to change with them. And I think this is an appropriate use, considering all its neighbors, for this property, and I will support it.
Go ahead, Mr. Rahman.
I just want to bring an analogy. You see Manhattan, right? Right next to is the Central Park. I was just watching the New York City homecoming concert the other day. So we are not making like all kinds of commercial buildings in the Central Park. We still see a lot of greeneries. The way I see that, this is not just two strips of lands that we are combining and making this multi-family housing. It is a continuation of the whole area. The Troy Trail ends there, right? It can be extended. It can be a very nice natural place for the Troy community, which we are destroying, covering up like a wall with multi-family houses. As I said, I have the pictures, I can show it to everybody, that I went there and I see a deer. And this gentleman over there, he said he had seen 3 of them. So I'm not sure if I am under the pressure to make a decision right now or recommending right now. So I will not support that at this point of time. Because that area is a prime area. We can make it, CD can look at it up and then see what else can be done. How can we make that trail continue up to Big Beaver so that people can make it a nice place. That kind of vision as a planning commission we should have. And there is no reason to, I respect the builder's recommendation for multi-family house. I know we need that. That's the missing part because we only see the urban sprawl in Troy. So definitely that's a good idea, but the location is not the correct location. So that will be my recommendation. So I will not support that.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Rausch.
I agree with Ms. Parek's comments, and I also appreciate what Mr. Hudson has said in terms of the likelihood of its being used as a single-family home site under new construction. It might even be a stretch to say that when you look at the number of houses that have gone up on Crooks Road in the last number of years. But by the same token, the owners of these homes bought these homes with the zoning in place, and the owners of the neighboring homes bought their homes with the zoning in place for this particular site. And I don't see a particular hardship that the current owners have, and to go from the present zoning to being able to put 25 units on what are now lots that might have three units on it under normal circumstances, I think it's just a bit of a stretch. I think if they were going to build 2 family units or 4 family units or 6 family units, it might be more realistic, but to go to 25 is not something that I can support.
Go ahead, Ms. Malala Holly.
Yeah, I agree with all the fellow commissioners. I am big into preserving green space, but I also realize the location. It is a pretty public area that we are talking about. And in terms of walkability, that's my other pet peeve about Troy. We need walkability. Is this a location that provides that? Yes. One of the commissioners pointed out the farmers market, I think, or one of the residents did. Walkability is a big thing. Yes, they can walk to the farmers market. Yes, they can walk to the park right across the street. Yes, they can go to the community center, probably the library, probably the aquatic center. There are lots that are happening in that area. So from that point of view, a single family residents coming in that area is a question mark. But at the same time, the reason I asked the developer that question is about the density. It has to, even if we were to bring in a couple more homes there, it's not the density that they are talking about or envisioning. I would have a little bit of a problem with that. I want urban space to be enjoyed. I want open space to be enjoyed. I want walkability. I want people to use this space in any which way, because to the north you will have the dog park, they can walk to the dog park, they can go on the trails. I mean, it's a beautiful place. I've been there 1,000 times. It's a very, very beautiful location. But it's the density, that close packed units that I see, that beehive-like structure, that is bothersome to me. And let's face it, Troy Master Plan Survey, the whole reason we went about asking residents, knocking on their door, or forcing them to come up with all these social media tools to answer the survey is to find out the pulse of the community. The pulse of the community clearly says they don't want this kind of denseness built. They want multifamily, that too they told us, but they did not say that they want such a packed development in such small areas. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind. I mean, the whole point of master plan survey, we have to keep that in the back of our mind. So I would want the Planning Commission to kind of revisit this whole proposal and address density big time.
Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Faison.
Could you put up the zoning map again, Ben? Just showing the mix of uses near the property?
Right. Zoning map up?
Sure. So, I mean, I think everyone has made valid comments, but when I just look at this and the mix of uses, and Mr. Hudson's comment about the viability of potential single-family development there, I completely agree with that. Also, Ms. Malala Holly's comment about walkability and adjacency to some areas that would be attractive, right, for residents of a development there. And then the final thing is, when I look at who's impacted, it doesn't seem that there are that many neighbors that are adjacent to that property, right? And I don't know if I'm missing something. I thought there was one or two houses to the south, right? It's Anthology to the north. It's the community center to the east, and then there's 7 acres of wetlands. To the west, and there's 7 acres of wetlands to the east. So, and I agree with the comments in the survey about density and all that, but it just seems like that's a pocket where the density is not really impacting adjacent single-family residents. So I tend to be more supportive of it than against it.
Anyone else? Mr. Lambert.
My major concern, and I think I brought it up in my questions about the planned unit development to the north, is creating a precedent of putting Big Beaver zoning into that area there. So I would be very hesitant at supporting the rezoning for Big Beaver zoning in that particular parcel.
Could I ask a question about that particular point?
Go ahead. He's gonna follow.
Just for clarity, I just want to understand. I guess, and this is a question. So when I look at this, I thought, okay, it's going to be potentially rezoned to Big Beaver, but the conditions are going to control what can be built there.
Yes, that's certainly true. So when we met with the applicant, he explained to us what his intent was and what he wanted to do. And so he said, he threw out different zoning options to consider, RT, multifamily. For various reasons, they really didn't fit. And if you want to talk about spot zoning precedent, I think if you went to other multifamily zoning designation, you could certainly argue that would be spot zoning because there's nothing like that near it. Big Beaver was chosen for a multitude of reasons. One, it allows the applicant to do multifamily, which is what he wants to do and what he's restricted himself to. He's limited himself in terms of what the height of what he's proposing. You've got Big Beaver across the street on both north and south of this, and you're not very far from Big Beaver District itself. And so in terms of if you're going to rezone this for multifamily, Big Beaver seemed to be the most sensible in our opinion. The second thing I'd add about why Big Beaver, if the commission does feel that multifamily is appropriate here, the reason why Big Beaver would be appropriate is there are very strict design guidelines and standards under Big Beaver zoning that we don't have in the multifamily, the UR, and the RT. That gives us and it gives you a lot of latitude and control in terms of what the architecture and design that you can require the applicant to do. So you have an opportunity to place a lot higher material standards, design standards, and architectural quality standards on a Big Beaver zone property than you would if this were chosen for multifamily. So it's a long way of saying the applicant came to us, said, I think multifamily is appropriate here. We talked about zoning options. In Brent and I's opinion, we felt that the most logical, if it was going to be rezoned to multifamily, the only zoning district that really makes sense for spot zoning and well as protection for the city is Big Beaver based on the reasons I just mentioned. So we, Mr. Lambert, to be honest, we were not necessarily concerned about a precedent in that respect because you already have Big Beaver across the street. And again, you're not very far from the Big Beaver district and Big Beaver corridor in itself.
That answer your questions? Your thoughts? Go ahead.
Follow up, just, I know at the last meeting I brought up the one question too, and I know Mr. Savident doesn't like this environmental protection zoning for that parcel to the east of it where the applicant is proposing a conservation easement. Why not a solution of Big Beaver on one part and then the rest all environmental protection?
Well, I would want some input from the city attorney on this just to kind of verify, but I believe that the conditional rezoning agreement that would be required to be submitted and would also accompany a conservation easement, which would restrict development on that parcel, would carry as much weight or more than the environmentally protection district would. But I would defer to Julie's expertise on that matter.
I mean, I think Mr. Salvador's right. I mean, it's the same. They would need to come back, whether we go the conditional rezoning route or actual EP zoning, they still would need to come back to this board and eventually city council for any changes. Do we still use, I thought we weren't using EP zoning anymore.
You mentioned that I wouldn't like it. I think it's a cumbersome tool to use in this kind of situation, but I do hear what the Planning Commission is saying, because if rezoned, what you see on the screen that's outlined in red is going to become red, and it's going to be a big splotch of red. Now it's going to have a hatch mark around it designating it as conditional rezoning, so it's going to look a little bit different, but it's still going to be red. So I do understand where you're coming from, and I guess there'd be nothing stopping both. If the applicant, we take him at his word that the line is the line, we could proceed with an EP line there, and so the Big Beaver district is smaller. I mean, that's something that this is a conditional rezoning, so the applicant would have to voluntarily offer that. But it's not a bad idea for optical reasons and other reasons.
Go ahead. Ms. Parakis was next.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify my position because a couple of people commented on what I said. I'm not suggesting at all that I think that a single-family home belongs there. What I'm suggesting is that it's a big jump to go to single-family residential to Big Beaver at this time. I think it's premature because I think we are currently looking at areas to see what we can do, and I don't think that it's any hardship to the people who own the land because they have owned it for however many years and it's always been single-family residential. We're not taking anything away from them. So I don't want to feel pressured and rushed into approving townhomes in particular when it's clear that there are other housing, types of housing needed in Troy. Perhaps less dense, but we've said over and over, we need first floor housing for seniors, we need affordable housing. So there's a lot of things to talk about, and I just don't think this is the time to give the green light on townhomes.
So this is for Mr. Savident. So this will be a Big Beaver Island, right? Like, is there any precedence before that we have this kind of approval? Like we are rezoning a separated land, which
We got to the northeast corner, northwest corner.
That's the Big Beaver? Okay.
Northwest corner, that was not zone Big Beaver in 8 years ago, 7 years ago.
And that's the only one we have?
I mean, I believe so, only one Big Beaver. That doesn't mean that we have other districts where we've rezoned it in certain areas that aren't exactly, don't have this consistent
So
zoning
is it
around
going to be continued, like if somebody close to Big Beaver but in the R1C, they can come and we will give approval? Or there's a criteria that's in the zoning ordinance?
Well, again,
And I don't know what was the background of that being converted to Big Beaver. Maybe you can shed some light on that. That would be very helpful.
the background was we received an application to rezone the parcel, and it went through the process, and it was approved by City Council. This is the same thing. There's an application. Your role as a planning commissioner is everyone gets a vote. We make a recommendation, and then if it's whether it's a vote of support or a vote of against it, it still goes to City Council for consideration.
Right. Because I feel like, this could be a slippery slope that we start, approving these small pieces of lands and as a Big Beaver, and then they'll be like all over the places. And I don't know if that is a good example or.
Well, I mean, like Ben indicated, the Big Beaver piece, that's now the Amber Apartments rezoned, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And this would be, in 10 years, this would be the first application that involved the rezoning to Big Beaver that was not contiguous since that one. So, concern about precedent, but we would consider applications to rezone on a case-by-case basis and weigh each application on their own merits.
Because, if we want to approve it or City Council wants to approve it, they have to go by those 5 items, right? That all of them has to be fulfilled, which is what is the number, 1604C3, that conditional rezoning. You have to check all of them. And I see that number 1, A, and then D and E. I cannot say that, at least with the evidence, the information that I have in front of me, I'm not convinced that we met all the criteria. First one is the master plan, because master plan doesn't say that it should be Big Beaver. And then the last 2 are the public service and facilities. Looks like the floodplain part is unclear, at this point of time. And then the third one is the land use appropriateness of this dense community next to the most dense forest that I can think of in Troy. I don't know, I didn't go through all of them, but at least I went to the backyard, the backside of the Anthology Senior Center. I was impressed with the denseness of the trees and then the nature that we have. I didn't know about it. So I just felt like, this is something that we should consider. Because we have to meet all the 5 requirements that zoning requirements, for this approval. So I don't think we meet all 5 of them. Thank you.
Anyone else? Got a question for, go ahead, Ms. Malala.
Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savidant, if you can please let me know, the Amber Apartments that was constructed on Town Center Drive, what's the height of those apartments? I know we had asked or we had visited this question, but I forget what the height was.
Do you have another question as I look this up?
Sure.
Second question, and I don't think it's exactly a question. It's more like the church that sits to the south of the proposed development. I have seen activity in that church, so of course people still are going to that place. It's pretty busy, but in the future, I'm just thinking out loud here, so please bear with me. Just thinking, will that also potentially then come up in the future as to be rezoned to a Big Beaver? I know nobody has answers to that question, right?
We don't know, and if it is rezoned to Big Beaver, or potentially it would fill in the gap of non-Big Beaver, because there's Big Beaver directly to the south as well, and there's Big Beaver across the street. And so essentially, if this is rezoned to Big Beaver, this whole area would now be Big Beaver. But again, we have not had any conversations with the church, and we don't know their future plans.
Right. No, yeah, that's absolutely correct. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in terms of answering the question about height, I don't have access to the G drive. I can run to my office in less than 5 minutes. I can do that.
Yeah, we'll be discussing things. Ben will help out for any questions, I assume.
Be careful what I say about you, Brent.
Yeah. So I've got a question actually for Ben. What if, instead of rezoning to Big Beaver, would we have more control over what's being developed if it was a PUD?
Certainly, but there's a higher threshold for a PUD in terms of community benefit and public benefit, and that would be up to the applicant if he wants to meet those requirements. I'm not sure what other control you would want other than sounds like a density reduction and or a different type of housing.
I think that's exactly it. Because you've got a PUD just to the north of it.
Yeah, and the reason we did the PUD for that one in particular was because there was using portions of the city land to do stormwater detention, so we had to use the PUD to meet that. We try not to use PUD to be a way of, it certainly shouldn't be a way of circumventing the ordinance. It's really used as a way of creativity with regards to using creative design to preserve a certain feature that we want to preserve and or allow for uses that we want to preserve. I think it would be up to the applicant. I'm not saying that PUD wouldn't be the right avenue to go. It would be up to the applicant if they want to go down this road. But there should be some strong discussion with the applicant about what you're looking for as part of the PUD with regards to either uses, density, et cetera.
Thank you for that.
The dog park was a big part of.
And yes, and not only they donate or they build out and they constructed parts of the dog park as part of the PUD too. So there was a public benefit. There was a public benefit as part of it.
Huge public benefit, absolutely. All right, have we expressed enough of our thoughts to reach a resolution? Who would like to propose a resolution?
Did you want to get the height of the...
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
just to have all the information?
Yeah, you're right. Good idea. We'll just take a pause here for a 5-minute breather. Go right ahead.
It's so quiet.
Well, we're taking a little pause.
The height of the Amber Apartments is 51 feet to the top of the parapet, to the highest point of the structure. It's four full stories plus a mezzanine, 51 feet.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Savidant.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
I'll move a resolution unless somebody else has some comments.
I think we're ready.
Resolved, the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the NN, quote, J, end quote, and EP to NN, quote, J, end quote, conditional rezoning request as per section 16.04 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the west side of, I think I've got the wrong resolution.
Yeah, it's
The third one, right? Last one.
Page 54.
I don't know if I got a 54 on here.
I got 55, but
It's on both.
oh, I see. It's 55 and 54.
Oh, 54.
All right, yes, 50.
50.
Different recommendations.
Yeah. Okay, so the recommendation on 54 would be in favor, and the recommendation on, the resolution on 55 would be against.
Yeah, I've got no page numbers on my computer.
I'll show you where it is. Number's right up here, 37 now, so you have to scroll down a bit. Go to 54.
Yeah, tell me when to stop.
There you go. You went past it. There you go. Now just hit the one, yeah, make it bigger. Good.
Yeah, I always help.
And you slide that thing across so you can see it. It gets lost. Now you're on 53, so go one more. Just scroll down. There you go. You're there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Let me withdraw that prior partial resolution and do this one. Resolved. The Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that R1C to BB conditional rezoning request as per 16.04 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance, located on the west side of Livernois, north of Big Beaver, within Section 22, being approximately 9.7 acres in size, be granted for the following reasons. 1, the rezoning of the site to Big Beaver would allow for the potential project to have more flexibility to provide for the consideration of a range of components such as improving walkability and sense of place in the city, and even reducing emphasis on parking. Additionally, Chapter 8 of the City of Troy 2017 Master Plan indicates that here is a lack of availability of innovative housing styles due to the predominance of single-family detached homes. The rezoning of this site to Big Beaver with the creation of a multiple-family residential development would remedy this lack of housing variation, which is consistent with the master plan. 2, the form-based district would permit greater flexibility in use and development of the property. 3, the conditions offered by the applicant reasonably protect the adjacent properties. 4, the rezoning would be compatible with the surrounding zoning and land use. 6, the site can be adequately served with municipal water and sewer. And next, the development of the property should not necessarily or unreasonably impact adjacent properties. Further resolved that the Planning Commission recommends the following site plan design considerations. End of resolution.
Any second on that?
No.
Mr. Roush, you want a second?
No, I don't want to second it, but I want to point out.
We'll do that after this. We've got a procedure to go through. Second on this resolution?
I support.
Good. We've got a second from Mr. Faison. Now we'll open up to discussion. Mr. Roush.
I believe that I believe in the resolution it reads on the, you read on the located on the west side of Livernois. I believe the site is on the east side of Livernois.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. Thank you. Move to amend the resolution to provide the correct description.
And a second?
I support the amended resolution.
Okay. Very good. Thanks for the catch. Anything else to be discussed before we move forward to the vote? Well, my thought, as I expressed earlier, we'd have more control on this rezoning if it was a PUD, and Mr. Kyle explained why it's probably not the best choice. That's why they went to Big Beaver. I think affecting the adjacent homes is a non-issue because they're not, the homes that are adjacent to the property is basically going to be preserved as wetlands. It's not going to impact those homes. The other thought is the possible density that this applicant, once it's rezoned to Big Beaver, could provide the kind of high density. My personal feeling about high density in residential areas that are adjacent to homes is a non-starter. I would not want to impose any of the high density multifamily homes next to a residence, single family homes. The other side of the coin I see is that Livernois is a rather major artery in our city, and this is a location where we would want multifamily homes, not inside of in the internal streets of a residential zone. So I'm having a difficult time weighing. The only obstacle from approving it for me is the density allowable under Big Beaver. The height has been, and we can't tell the applicant to put a recommendation or a requirement to limit the amount of units or the amount of land coverage by the amount of units. That's totally up to him to do, and we can't say anything. So for that reason, I'm going to not vote in the positive for this particular resolution. I think it could be rethought a little better. I don't know if maybe a PUD might give us that flexibility. It's adjacent to a PUD, but then again, like Mr. Kyle said, what is the public benefit? There is no public benefit here unless the creative mind of the developer can think of a way to say, oh, we're preserving 80% of this property as a public benefit for wildlife. That's, to me, a public benefit, but that's not that hasn't been given by the applicant yet. So those are my thoughts. Go ahead.
Can I just share something, my thoughts
Sure.
in line with what you just said? So I feel like, and I don't know if we can ask question to Mr. Savinen at this point, probably not. But my question is, this is so prime place right next to the other things that we have, community center, the farmers market, and so on, and then Troy Trail that I mentioned before. Do you think that city can work with the applicant to do something which could just have some public activity plus something? So that
I think you're asking a bridge too far kind of thing.
Right.
It's private property. It's not city property. You really can't.
Right, but I'm also not bound to, and we're going to do the same thing to allow them to make it a Big Beaver for density reason and many other reasons, right? So then it will be like another 50 years, it will be sitting like that. So that's why, this is my comment, so I'm done.
Mr. Rausch?
I was just going to say the applicant certainly could come back with conditional rezoning that accomplishes the same objective.
Yeah, but we can't,
No, I know that.
You're on a knife's edge there.
That's entirely up to him.
Yeah.
Just as PUD would be up to him as well.
Okay, any other thoughts before a vote?
Do you think that what I just said, do you think that there is an opportunity to kind of look into like how we can fit in the other things other than that question to Mr. Savinen? I don't know if it's appropriate to ask.
I don't understand your question.
So if this thing goes down this time, so what is the next time when do you think that we can do something which is resembling the type of things that we have, like community center? This could be a park, an entrance of a park or something, so there's plus some other things so that the owner is benefited out of that. It could be just fewer apartments or multi-family houses. So it's like a PUD type idea, but I don't know if it is even possible.
The property is not indicated as a potential park on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The quick answer is no. It's privately owned, and we would probably wait until there was another application, and we would consider that application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts before a vote? Vote, please.
Mr. Lambert?
No.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
No.
Ms. Parakis?
No.
Mr. Rumman?
No.
Mr. Roush?
No.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
No.
6 noes and 2 yeses.
Okay, that motion failed. Do we have another resolution? Mr. Lambert?
I assume that we need to have some resolution to recommend to City Council, so I would move to resolve that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the R1C to BB conditional rezoning request as per section 16.04 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the east side of Livernois, north of Big Beaver, within section 22 being approximately 9.7 acres in size, be denied for the following reasons. 1, the conditions offered by the applicant do not reasonably protect the adjacent properties. 2, the rezoning would be incompatible with surrounding zoning and land use. And 3, the development of the property would unreasonably impact adjacent properties.
Discussion. Oh, second. I'm sorry. We need a second for that. Ms. Barakis will be noted for that one. Now, discussion on this resolution. Any thoughts from the commission? Seeing none, a vote please.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Raj?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
No.
Mr. Hudson?
No.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
6 yes, 2 noes.
Okay, the motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to the next item unless we need a break. Mr. Savage.
I just want to clarify for everyone on the board, in the room, watching on TV. The motion to deny passed, so the recommendation moving forward from the Planning Commission is to deny this application, but it will still be going before the City Council for consideration.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is public hearing. It's a,
Are we going to take 5 minutes break, or?
you want a break?
I mean, if we, I don't have to, but no, so.
I'm fine, but if any number of people would like a break, we can do that for 5 minutes. No?
We're good.
Okay, we're good.
Move on.
Public hearing, Troy Crossing Planned Unit Development, file number PUD JPLN 2021-0008, proposed amendment to the Troy Crossing PUD, north side of Big Beaver, east of John R. parcels 88-20-24-352-067 and 068, section 24, currently zoned PUD 8, Planned Unit Development 8 District.
Thank you.
Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you. So Troy Crossing PUD was a PUD approved by the Planning Commission in 2017. The site is located on the north side of Big Beaver, just east of John R. And above you is the outline of the property and area, and you can see this was taken probably a year or so ago with only one building currently constructed at this point. The approved site plan in 2017 included 4 3-story residential apartment buildings totaling 108 units, 2 retail/restaurant facilities totaling approximately 10,000 square feet in a community center. So the outline in front of you, the 4 residential buildings are all the buildings in yellow. The 2 commercial buildings are those in red. Those retail buildings front on Big Beaver, with the apartments kind of in the back and to the side of those. To date, all 4 buildings have either been constructed or are in the process of being constructed at this moment. The applicant is seeking a proposed revision to that 5th and final buildings that are in front. They say due to market conditions, they're seeking amendment to convert those 2 commercial buildings into 1 building that would match the 4 other buildings. It would add approximately 25 additional residential units and approximately maintain 2,000 square feet of restaurant retail within that building number 5. We do note that parking is sufficient based on our site plan review from going from retail to residential. So just a summary of the differences between the 2017 approval and the proposed. 108 units were approved with 10,000 square feet of retail. They're seeking amendment to have a total of 133 units with 2,000 square feet of retail. Again, the 2017 had 4 residential buildings with 2 smaller commercial buildings. They're proposing 5 residential buildings with a small retail component as part of Building 5. This is a proposed rendering of what that Building 5 would look like. It would match the 4 other buildings on site. So Planning Commission is asked to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council. If approved, we do note that the applicant would be required to submit a revised landscape plan and photometric plan for that Building 5, because the photometric plan and landscape plan approved were for 2 buildings, and so obviously it will have to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Any thoughts for Ms. Barakis? You had your first hand up.
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Carlisle, and sorry if it's a little bit basic, but I don't think I've been on the Planning Commission since we've had a PUD come before us. And could you give a little bit of a background for me at least, basically what the rules are around them and what it's almost like you have a deal, some sort of a deal. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so deal to me is a negative term. It's a negotiated process. And so what a PUD is, it's a rezoning associated with a site plan. And the reasons we do PUDs, I kind of mentioned earlier in the last application, is they're used as a tool for flexibility to allow for more creative either mix of uses and or land use layout that would not be allowed under conventional zoning. And so it is really a negotiation. The applicant submits their plan, Planning Commission and staff discuss it, make changes, etc. It allows a lot more give and take than what the conditional rezoning process was. Applicant gives us, offers conditions and you either approve them or you don't. So it's much more of a negotiation of a process. The reason why, if I remember correctly, the reason why we did a PUD for this one was for the mix of uses, allow for a mix of uses on these sites. Originally, when we met with the applicant, he had a significantly greater amount of retail than residential. And we came back and said, what about incorporating more residential onto the site? And it kind of, as the process worked along and the market changed, he came back and it was pretty much mostly residential with that, again, that small component of retail. Obviously, as the market has changed even further, the applicant finds that retail isn't viable, so that's why they're coming back in for residential. And so the major difference with the PUD is, one, it's a different process. It is rezoning, so it goes through the normal rezoning process, but there's a lot more flexibility and give and take between the Planning Commission and the applicant. And secondly, there's that public benefit aspect that I spoke of earlier. There's something the applicant's giving us in exchange for allowing relief from the zoning ordinance. And so that's all part of the PUD process.
So the public benefit is the retail space?
Public benefit originally, well, I think if I remember correctly, again, this was 4 or 5 years ago. So it was the mix, more of the mix of uses, because we really hadn't got a true mixed use development on Big Beaver up until to that point. And so we looked at this really as a mixed use type of development.
Just
you remember differently or more than I have.
No, a couple things. Just the public benefit is one of many standards. It's not the standard. There's a list of standards and the applicants to meet some of those standards. But just to piggyback on Ben's summary of the history of this project was approved as a PUD before Mr. Nager purchased the property. There was significant commercial along the frontage, and then parking and a water feature, and then I think around 16 attached units to the north. Then it was approved but never went anywhere. The recession happened and it didn't go anywhere. Then Mr. Nager acquired an interest in the property, and I don't want to put words in Mr. Nager's mouth, but like Ben indicated when we first talked, I think you'd agree, Brian, that the focus of this property was the commercial component, and when we first talked about it, the residential was kind of an afterthought. And then as we got, like Ben said, as we got further into it, the residential component became more important, the commercial became less important. And then here we are in 2020 where it's come full circle and the commercial is less important than the residential. And the market has really, I think Mr. Nager has been patient and he's waited to make sure that his investment was going to coincide with how the market was. And here we are in 2021 with a proposed amendment with the smaller commercial component and a larger residential component.
Very good. I know Mr. Rahman had his hand up. Go ahead.
Initial proposal, when we have like 2 buildings, what was the height of the front 2 buildings, the retail buildings?
1 story.
Right. And it was done so that it looks nice, right? So that you have some kind of a nice look. Now, we are having 3-story buildings. It's going to look like a colony, the way I'm thinking. And then also, my question is it on Big Beaver? Okay. So there is certain regulation, right, on the Big Beaver that you have to have glass, 50% or some percent of the glass in front of the Big Beaver Road, right?
There's regulations for transparency within the Big Beaver zoning district. This is not in the Big Beaver zoning district. This is zoned PUD.
Yeah, I know, but we are changing the PUD. PUD was the first story because it was the storefronts, which are mostly glass. Now we are making houses like the apartment buildings. So I don't think it would look nice. I mean, I'm okay with maybe we can do something with like in front instead of on the side, the glass to retail places that it's shown, it has to be in the front. And then the height has to be lower so that it looks nice. Because otherwise, I don't think it would look nice on Big Beaver, especially when it's on Big Beaver Road. That's my opinion, you know.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Thank you, Chairman. Couple questions. I need to remove my mask for better audio here. So PUD means that the residents in that area benefit from something that is being constructed on the property aside from the residential housing, could be retail space or community center. Now, the proposal that is in front of us says that there will not be any community center. And now the proposal says that they are going to reduce the retail space, which obviously they may have done some good market analysis to determine that 10,000 square feet was quite a lot of retail space, and they're bringing it down to 2,000. My understanding is if it is a PUD and if it is for the residential benefit as well, wouldn't a community center be something that should be on the plan?
So, I'm sorry, you finished your question?
Yeah, that's one of
So
them.
there is the community center. Do you have the pointer? There is a community center already built. It's this location. So the community center is there.
I see. Okay.
When we talk about community benefit does not necessarily tie specifically to the residence or the property itself. Sometimes community benefit can be significant road improvements above and beyond what was sought upon. It may be preservation of open space on the development or adjacent to the development. It's not necessarily tied to the benefit to the particular residents of that development when we talk about community benefit. So I want to be just clarify what the term community benefit really means. Okay. It's a public good. It's something that is a benefit to the community as a whole. It can be a benefit to the residents of that particular development, but it also is looked at as a benefit to the city of Troy as a whole when we talk about community benefit.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got the standards for PUD approval on the screen. Can I go through them very, very quickly?
Oh, absolutely, go right ahead.
So the applicant shall demonstrate that through the use of a PUD option, the development will accomplish a sufficient number of the following objectives. So here they are here. A mix of land uses that would not otherwise be permitted without a PUD. Public improvement or public facility, which would enhance, add to, or replace those provided by public entities. A recognizable and material benefit to the ultimate users of the project and the community. So again, that's public benefit's one standard of many. Long-term protection, preservation of natural features, natural resources, historic and cultural resources, compatible mix of open space, landscape areas, and or pedestrian amenities, appropriate land use traditions between the PUD and surrounding properties, design features and techniques such as green building, low impact design, innovative and creative site and building design solutions and materials, the desirable qualities of a dynamic urban environment that is compact, designed to human scale, and exhibits contextual integration of buildings and city spaces. It will unreasonably mitigate impacts to the transportation system, enhance non-motorized facilities and amenities. Complementary variety of housing types. Again, there's a litany of standards. Keep in mind, this application went before Planning Commission and City Council years ago. It was a little bit different than this. It had, so when we talk about transitions, for example, the petitioner built a wall between this property and the residential, and then there's carports that further provide buffer between the residents and this development. My point is that when you look at those standards, you have to look at the standards not only for the application that's before us this evening, which is one of the eliminating 2 commercial buildings and building 1 mixed-use building, but those standards were applied for the entire project. So we can't look at it with blinders on and focus only on this improvement. There were other things that were done that also address those standards when the PUD was before Planning Commission and City Council years ago. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I get it. Any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Faison. Go ahead.
Hey, Ben, could you put up the rendering of the building? I think you had it up earlier. So I was trying to understand where the retail space is going to be.
It's not shown, it's on the far back side, yeah.
So it's not on the first floor with apartments above, it's off on the side?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because that's what the plan looks like, so that's what I was asking. Okay, thank you.
It's on the west side, right? On the west side.
Correct.
So it's not on the back side. Just want to clarify because I probably.
The back side of this image.
Right.
It's the backside of this.
Of this image, okay.
All right, any other questions before I bring up the developer? Go ahead, Mr. Rausch.
Rather than asking the question of the developer, I'll ask Ben and Brent the likely solution. So I looked at the site, very attractive buildings, and the one thing that I see there is the very shallow lawn areas that they have to work with to be able to put trees or trees. You know, some of those look like maybe 5 to 10 feet deep at most, and to be able to put a nice tree that's going to do any kind of screening or break up the building mass is very difficult because they must be really limited on what they can do there. Is there if one of the things that would I think would look nice if they could beef up the landscaping, is there something that you could suggest that would accomplish that, given the limited amount of lawn area that they have to be able to plant something in? And I'll take that one step further. If you go beyond the sidewalk, you know, you're in the way of visual screening for traffic and trying to pull in and out of the development. So it's kind of really limited, and they show in this particular building, it looks like they're putting the trees or shrubbery in planter boxes.
Yeah.
So we can certainly come up with suggestions for the applicant to consider to beef up the landscaping. Like you said, there's only so much you can do in a 10-foot wide space. There may be some discussion. So this is a PUD, so we have normally on a big B we have a 10-foot build-to line. There's a little flexibility because it's a PUD, we can kind of vary that. You may want to ask the applicant if they can provide a little more space in front of the building, 5 or 10 more additional feet to do something more robust within that. You know, 20 feet would be a little bit area to be a little more robust, but like you know, there's not a whole lot we can do in 10 feet, but we can certainly work with the applicant to do some combination of either landscaping or hardscaping to make it a more inviting space, yes, if that's your question.
Follow up? Sure. So in relation to that, can you pull the site plan up again? Because I'm not sure that there's really much room for him to be able to shift to try and provide more.
It would, the building would have to be a little narrower. I don't know if it looks like building 5 matches building 2 and 1, but it looks like 3 and 4 perhaps a little narrow, so maybe they can kind of play with the floor plans a little bit. Again, I'm speaking for the applicant here, and it really should be their question to answer on that type of issues.
I understand. I'm just trying to be reasonable in my request. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts for the staff or planning director? Okay, applicant, please step forward and let's hear your story. Sitting too long, huh?
Yeah, a little bit.
Me too.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Nager, the applicant for Troy Crossing, also known as the Phoenix. So we've got a good preview into the development here. I've actually been living and breathing this thing now for probably 5 years, even before 2017. Brent gave a little bit of history. This thing was already an approved PUD, so when I got into the picture, the development did look much, much different. So going back and forth a little bit, well, it actually had about 24,000 square feet of retail, and then two drive-throughs. So the big sell on the development was the drive-through. Even today, drive-throughs are highly sought after. Any new development that we're doing, we're looking to do the drive-through with COVID, and more retailers just desire that drive-through. So that was the big selling point, and going back and forth a little bit with Brent, and I'm going back pretty far here because I know some of you, you know, haven't seen this before. So going back and forth with Brent and Ben, you know, we started playing with it and we reduced some of the retail down and we increased some of the units, and I'm probably talking about a year process here prior to even bringing it into, you know, to the revised PUD. What we came up with after going back and forth, and I still remember the conversation with Brent, he just said, you know, Brian, you're not bound by anything here. If you want to take this thing, just you know, start with a blank slate and figure out what's going to work best here, the highest and best use. So at that point, we went back to the drawing board, started all over, and started pushing a little bit more towards the residential because, you know, I actually do a lot of retail, and, you know, I started to see the trends happening where there weren't, the uses became more and more limited. So we're seeing that more and more these days with the Amazon effect and delivery, and the categories just keep shrinking. Every time they build a Walmart or Amazon decides to expand, you know, there's only so many pizza places and hair salons and nail salons, and, you know, the categories just keep shrinking. So what ended up happening is that we started increasing and going for more residential. So the give and take there is that if we're focusing now more on the residential in this project, that becomes 80% of this project. If I'm living there and I'm going to move in there, I want to make sure that this is a place I want to live. So, you know, we had to be very considerate now of the residential portion of this thing here. It sounds great, you know, we're going to have restaurants and shops, and you know, it can work to a certain extent, but you also have to be careful. So having marketed this retail component of 10,000 square feet for the past 3-4 years, we're getting our answers, and they're pretty much what I thought they were. The retail is not very desirable. It's not on a prime corner. We would be out positioned by other retail spaces that are in more desirable locations. I happen to own other Big Beaver on retail, retail on Big Beaver as well. It's called Kilmer Plaza. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's a very nice retail center, very similar to this, a little bit larger. It's got the Tim Hortons with a drive-through, Sleep Number, DeBella's, and then Sai Tai, really great restaurant if you guys haven't eaten there. But, you know, I sort of understand and know the retail market, and the demand is not as great as you might think. So for all these reasons, and I could talk more about it, I'll give you a little bit more insight. So when we were marketing the thing, one of the users that I had that was potentially going to go there was Tropical Smoothie Cafe. So we were close to signing a lease with them. Long story short, Art Van Pure Sleep goes out of business. They have a better location. It's right in front of Troy Sports Center. They decide they're going to take that space instead. Makes sense. I don't blame them. It's a better location. There's more traffic. It's on the corner. He's got a built-in audience. Another tenant that I had that was super interested in it was Buddy's Pizza. Great operation, great product. We talked to them about potentially taking one of the two buildings. I was super excited about it. What ended up happening is that they wanted to be, the main issue was that they wanted a big outdoor patio component. So that posed all kinds of challenges to us with our parking ratio, you know, the amount of seats they wanted. And again, I had to be considerate of the tenants that would be living there. Again, you know, if I'm living there, do I want 150 cars parked in there? I can't get a parking spot. We know what the requirements were. We would have met the requirements with the parking. But common sense told me that deal just wouldn't work. We would be probably valeting cars and leasing parking maybe next door, and it just would have been a mess. So that was another, you know, potential deal. So the idea here is that even today, if you told me, you know, Brian, we can approve a drive-through here, that would be great. I'd probably get a long list of tenants that I could put there. But I wouldn't do that because we don't want to affect our residential, not the residents living there. So Long process, and it's been a very, it's been a very nice development. Troy, you guys have been great to work with. We're super proud of what we put up there. The looks changed a little bit, and again, we're just proud of, what's been happening there. We've had nothing but positive feedback. Originally, there was some, as with any development, concerns from residents. I'm proud to say that, we haven't had any complaints. Anything that was, maybe in the beginning, if there was one issue with a tree, I mean, we worked with the residents there, and I think everybody's very happy. We haven't had any complaints, so overall, we're very happy with it. I'm happy to answer any questions too.
Oh, we'll just start in order. Ms. Malala Holly, we just go around.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for being here. And yes, it is a beautiful looking building. No, undeniably. I drove around there and I was very impressed. It is pretty different for Troy. So thank you for that. So you must have done the market analysis because you just gave us all the information about why the retail space is not lucrative for you anymore, and that you're reducing it to have more residential. Do you have a lot of people who are expressing interest in having more residential space here? I mean, do you already have residents wanting to move in as soon as it gets ready? How's that? So that's one question. I'm just going to quickly add another question so I don't take too much time here. I saw the facade. As I said, it's beautiful, but envisioning the building 5, sitting right on Big Beaver, I don't know. I know everything is already laid out and you've all planned it very well. I love the boxes there, the planter boxes there. But is there any way you can create, because it will house some retail there, any way that you can create some aesthetic, some design aesthetic there that will tell you that this building also has another unique feature sitting on there? Because your retail space is sitting to the west of, right? Or I'm sorry if I'm directly challenged here.
Correct.
So I know your design is already probably there, but I was like envisioning, it's a nice concept. I love to have first floor, something different, gym, coffee shop. I mean, even with COVID, nobody will stop from walking themselves into a coffee shop. I can assure you that. Even a drive-through, but even walking in. Okay, so coffee shop is a great gathering space as well. Gym is nice, but I don't know how your market analysis talks about that. And any kind of yoga studios, that is a nice product that people would like to see in a residential area. Moms drop off the kids and then hit the yoga studio and then back home or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
That's the Big Beaver corridor, and that's the space that we envision Troy to be, a happening, buzzing, community-oriented space. So those are my 2 things that I want you to address.
So great comments, and it sounds like we're aligned in our thinking here, because the only thing that I'm regretting right now is that we're showing the building from the east. So what we did, and again, our thinking was aligned here. We actually did it's the first floor space of the east portion of the building that has become the retail, and it's retail with that exact consideration in mind. In fact, I've already been talking to a breakfast brunch place. So the thought was, let's put something that's harmonious with the development, with the residents. Do I want a restaurant bar there? No, we don't want people, dining into the evening, taking up parking spaces. We absolutely don't want, somebody with a liquor license there. This is supposed to be something that should serve that area, the residents. Maybe a UPS, FedEx store, maybe a gym, yoga studio, maybe a coffee shop or a brunch place. So I'm thinking, along the lines of a First Watch, something like that's going to be open early, probably closing at 4 o'clock. And if it's not, potentially a gym as well. Those people are probably going to be more active during the day, and then as residents come back in at night, we want that to be harmonious. So again, this picture I think is beautiful, but maybe it's just not painting the right picture for you guys, because on the east portion, we did actually, in fact, glaze the entire, what would it be, the south wall, the west wall, and the north wall. So it has a different look. It's all glass. It's a retail space. And then we left a little area there, if we could switch it to the other, the overview. We left an outdoor patio component there. I don't know if you could see it. It's pretty small, but is that maybe 10 feet, 15 feet of outdoor patio. And I also left that small parking there in front, so it would be easy for people to come in and out. If it turned out to be a coffee shop, we've got about 5 or 6 spaces there, and you know, they would be utilizing that parking around that retail unit. So it is going to still have that mixed use and retail effect that we're looking for, and we think it would be, you know, harmonious with the development and something that we'd be proud of. The community center is in the back, that is already up, and potentially, I mean, we will have fitness in there. Whether or not we open it up to other people remains to be seen, but I think it's going to be more for the residents to use. So we're going to have a small fitness center in there, community building and kitchen and things like that. So everything we were doing was just trying to keep in mind, you know, if you or I lived there, and what would we want to see there. So this is not financially driven, and it's just, I think, what's going to work best with that. The other thing I'll just bring up quickly was, you know, the landscaping issue. I think that with the retail building there, we haven't changed anything. The footprint has actually gotten smaller. So I think with this outdoor patio component, that's going to have more landscaping there. The planter boxes up front, I think were always proposed and always part of the plan, and that's not really changing. So I think if anything, maybe we'd be adding a little bit more landscaping on that west side, where we'd have an outdoor patio.
Quick, I'm going to, before I hit to Mr. Rouse, I just want a little more clarification on the layout. I'm getting like different images in my head. So the retail is now on the east side, not the west side?
The west side.
It is on the west side.
Did I say east? I apologize.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay. That's okay. So that helped my, yeah. My thought though, just from a person driving down Big Beaver, if you're looking at traffic on your side of the street is going west. So why don't you have, because the signage for a coffee shop is going to be hidden on the west side of the building, why not put on the east side of the building your retail, so that when you're driving you say, oh yeah, there it is, pull in before you hit it? Because once you're going 45 miles an hour, once you're past the building, I'm not stopping, I'm going to the next one.
Right.
So I just thought I'd throw that out there, because I heard east and west. I'm thinking, wait a minute, maybe he changed his mind. I like the idea of it on the east side for traffic reasons, for the owner of the retail business, for signage. Anyway, that's my thought. Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Mr. Nature, I also like the building. Very nice job on the buildings. I found it a little bit awkward trying to get out of the parking lot on the west side with that signal there that only really serves the people that are doing the U-turn. It seemed kind of odd. People didn't understand.
When you're trying to make the right and they're
you're trying to make
the left.
a right and they're not sure whether you're making the left or not.
Yeah.
It was kind of odd, but and I echo the chairman's comments, because the landscaping I'm interested in is, I was hoping that you could do something a little bit more, something that's going to be, because you're only got that 10 feet. I don't know if you can get an arborvitae that'll grow 15 feet, 20 feet in the tall, compared to the small trees you'd have to put in planter boxes. And I certainly wouldn't want those to end up screening even more the retail that's on the west side. So again, I think that Mr. Lambert's comments that if you could switch it to the east side, it would be beneficial. And my comments also, as it relates to the landscaping, really applies to the entire development. Anything you could do that would beef it up, it's really limited because of all the pavement that you have and the limited amount of lawn space.
We can look at we can look at seeing what we can do. Again, this was done in totality with bioswales, and I mean there's things that I had never even heard of before this, but bioswales and this, all the landscape, the amount of cover and everything else. So getting back to both, I don't think that putting it on the east side is a bad idea, but with it in mind, or the reason I did it this way was because the main entrance to the development is the west side. And if I'm a retailer, I want as much access to this thing as I can get, and that is definitely the main entrance, and that's where you can do the first cut on Big Beaver and flip around. So being on the east side,
It's your prerogative. I'm
right, I was
But-
just giving an
yeah.
explanation that I did think about it.
Okay, but the retails were both facing west, correct? Both, there's not two retails on the facing Big Beaver. They're really facing the west, those two retail spaces.
No, it's facing Big Beaver also.
It is.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Both of them face Big Beaver.
Which,
Both retail stores.
oh no, there's going to be one retail store.
That's it, just one? Okay, never mind.
Yeah, it's between 2,000 and 2,200
Got it.
square feet.
Okay, enough said.
And again, I think that the use that I have in mind is a breakfast brunch concept,
That's fine. Little
probably a
clarification.
7 a.m. to 4 p.m. concept.
Ms. Parakis.
Okay, I happen to really love the buildings. They're beautiful. I really like them, so great job with that.
Thank you.
I agree with the east side thing. Keep in mind it's a turnaround. Once you pass it, no one's doing a double turnaround to come back. So I would definitely consider bringing it to the east side, but that's an aside. You mentioned in the, I read it somewhere in my packet, you said you had substantial feedback was obtained, and I wanted to know a little bit about that. Did you formally survey residents? Is it more of just anecdotal?
Well, I mean, from our leasing activity, it's been phenomenal from, comments on the look of the building. We get comments all the time. And, Village Green is actually managing the day-to-day for us there. So, I'm in there 5 times a week,
Okay.
talking to them, hearing feedback, and, people just love it.
Okay, I mean, here's my issue with it, I guess, because we're getting caught up in this 2,000 square feet, but really, right now, it should be 10,000 square feet of retail space. So we haven't really gotten to the shrinking of it yet. And now that I understand the PUD, that was the initial negotiation. So, the idea that there's additional traffic and noise, I mean, you're on Big Beaver, that was to be expected when those people signed the lease.
Right.
So I'm now looking at whether or not it's appropriate to shrink that down. You guys, you and Ms. Mulholly came up with a bunch of great ideas to fill that space. 10,000 to 2,000, we're down to 20% of the original. So I'm sitting here, and maybe this is a question for the staff, but I want to make sure we're preserving the integrity of the PUD. As a process, as a tool. I mean, on the one hand, I actually love this, that you guys can come in and tell you what's working and based on the market, and we can adjust for you. I actually love that because I think it makes sense. But again, I'm relatively new, and I just want to make sure we're preserving the integrity of the PUD because, I like what you're saying, and I trust you, and I think it's great, but what's going to happen when someone else comes and negotiates a PUD, and really the whole time they're going to do one thing, that's what they have in their mind. They tell us something different, and then they know they're just going to walk back in a couple years later and change it on us. That's what I'm worried about. So again, nothing against you because you've done your research, and I actually think this is a great process that makes sense. But I just, and again, I don't know if it's a question for you or the applicant, but I just wanted to throw it out there.
So when again, it's been 5 years that we've kind of gone back and forth, and as it's continued to move forward, but there's been back and forth, and when Mr. Nature contacted me and explained what he wanted to do, that was my concern as well, was maintaining the integrity of the PUD, and my advice to him was to keep a commercial component. Now, what percentage of the building should be commercial? I don't know. I don't vote. I don't make a recommendation to City Council. The Planning Commission does, but I do know that and I know that you weren't inferring that Mr. Nature is trying to pull a fast one by getting approved for 10,000. You weren't inferring that, but I know that the comments Mr. Nature has made about having conversations with potential tenants, and he shared these with me over the 5 years. I mean, he told me about a cool coffee shop concept that was interested, and you know, he'd call me up and say, hey, I got news, I got potentially this, and so I'm aware of the efforts that were made. Now, I believe that there does need to be a mixed-use component. Now, that's one of the questions some feedback we're seeking from the Planning Commission is what's proposed enough. Everyone looks at things a little bit differently. I look at this a little bit differently, and it was originally 10,000 feet of one story. I'm actually excited by the fact that it's going to have more massing on Big Beaver with the additional height, and it's going to have vertical mixed use in a vertical mixed use building, because we'll be able to point to it and say, mixed use does work in suburban communities. There's an example right there. We can point to this. I believe that, again, only my opinion, not an architect, but as one drives west on Big Beaver and hits this development, it is a gateway into Big Beaver, and it is a gateway into something that's more intense, more dense, more, you know, mixed use, and it sends a message that you're arriving in the Big Beaver corridor. Even though it's not zone Big Beaver, it's a little bit to the east. I do think that the massing and the height of that building does work on that level.
Thank you. And I guess that would be where I was going with it. I don't know if 10,000 feet would be the footprint of that building number 5, but I guess what I was wondering if you would consider is having that entire first floor be the retail that you guys discussed with all these different ideas, but we would allow the building of the apartments above, because that would be true mixed use that we've been looking for. You've got the right look and the right feel with the modern building, and it looks sweet. And I think that I'd love to see that, but staying true to the negotiated 10,000 retail. I mean, I'm willing to come down from the 10,000. I don't know what that footprint is, but maybe maybe that whole lower level. I don't know how many square feet that is.
Yeah, I'll address. I don't think that's a bad idea. Unfortunately, it probably wouldn't work here because we wouldn't meet the parking requirements. I'm already concerned about just having 10,000 square feet of retail. I'm already concerned, and I've already had to turn away tenants because it just won't work. We can make it work. Again, when we had Buddy's Pizza there, if I would have put Buddy's Pizza in that space, we could have eased, I mean, it fit through, you know, with the ordinance and everything else. We had the required parking, but I think it would have been a nightmare for residents living in there. So again, we have to be very conscious of what we put in there. I don't think that I could fill 10,000 square feet comfortably, even though those are the parking requirements. There's not enough non-intense users to fill it for me. So I think that would, you know, that would look great. That's why I tried to keep the intent of the mixed use and build the amount of retail that I know we can lease out, rather than putting up 5,000 or 10,000 square feet and just to say we did it and it's going to be sitting there vacant. And I know there's a lot of vacancy up and down Big Beaver. There's plenty of it, and there's more coming.
Can you just give me a ballpark of that?
The footprint is 7,500?
I think close to it.
Yeah. And the reason it works is because, you know, utilities are in place and design is similar. So if we said, you know, shrink the building down, and there's economies of scale here. We've designed the buildings. We know the materials. We know the costs. We know exactly what we're doing. So to change it would be redesigning the building, redesigning the mechanicals, everything else, and it would present challenges. So if we took the building and maybe, you know, changed it or changed the look, it's going to change the whole dynamic of everything. So.
Yeah, we're just going to go around the circle here because everybody's got.
We could, yeah.
Okay, does that answer your question, Ms. Parakas?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Rahman.
Okay, so just numbers, you know. So we are looking at 7,500 square feet. You think that building floor area?
I'm not exactly sure. It's somewhere between 7,500 and 8,500 because the
8,500.
Yeah.
So 9,000. So 3 levels, so 27,000 square feet. And it was supposed to be 10,000 retail area-wise? Yeah, so we're making it three times, right? So it's a significant change. And again, I think your point that we are changing after it was agreed upon, right? So that's something is definitely, it's not a good idea. I don't know how we're going to handle that, but that's one part. I'm okay with three-story, building, multi-use, but it seems like you are trying to hide those commercial places, like the retails. Is there any intent? Is there a structural reason, or you just don't want to show?
Allow me to introduce myself, Richard Atto. I was the general contractor, and I've been working on the project since the beginning, not through the planning, but once it was approved. So they're not really hidden, because when you view the building, and unfortunately the elevation that we did.
No, I saw the elevation.
It's probably not very well thought out, because we should have showed the elevation.
No, the elevation based on whatever you have.
The look of the building, we should have showed it from the west, because then you would have seen the storefront.
No. I'm trying to see it from the south side. That's the
right, and that's my point. If we would have viewed it from the west, you would have seen the storefront on the west and on the south side, which is where the signage would be. And driving by a building, especially a nice modern-looking building, and seeing the storefront and the signage, it automatically screams that there's something else going on here. It's not just another apartment building, because you don't drive by and see, illuminated signs, especially if they're crafted in a way to blend with the retailer. So, and we had this, maybe it should be on the east, maybe it should be on the west, maybe we create the amount of retail that we have on the west side and also on the east side. That's up to Brian to decide.
Yeah, that's what I was going to.
So now all of a sudden, if you're coming westbound, you see the signage. If you're coming eastbound, you can turn in at the light, which a lot of people like to do. Very few people come in on the east entrance, because they have to go a half a mile and make the U-turn. So everybody wants to pull up to the light. By the way, if you pull up to the light and it's red and you're not turning left, they start honking at you. But we just sit there patiently, because you can't go straight through on a red unless the police eventually put some different signage. But most of the people want to enter on the west entrance, which is why we thought, but if it would help the concept of having, we know it's mixed use, but maybe we want to make it look more mixed use and.
Yeah, it looks like not symmetric. The whole place was symmetric to begin with, right? The way it was like a low height building in the front, it looks very,
but I think from
really
the
nice.
street, as you're traveling, it's more the storefront that'll attract and the signage than what's above it. I think, in my opinion, that's.
So I just want to, because I know a lot of people, they want to, the commissioners want to share their thoughts. So my thought was, I know the 2,000 square feet, can I move whole 2,000 square feet in front on the first floor? Or maybe make some adjustment, instead of 2,000, it could be 4,000, but still we can have a couple of apartments on the back side?
Just by an example, the building is only, it steps in and out, but the average is about 50 feet, I believe, on the depth. In some areas it's more, some areas it's less. So the 2,000 feet would be roughly 40 by 50. And again, I don't have the measurements, but so if you have 50 feet on the west and 40 feet on Big Beaver, it still gives you the entrance, the glass storefront door, the signage. Having 10 more feet may not make much of a difference, but maybe having another 40 feet at the east end, all of a sudden it starts to look like more of a retail.
Because I have an issue with the transparency. Because, if you were not PUD, would go by the Big Beaver transparency requirement, which is 50% should be glass. But then now we are changing it. And then we see brick walls. It doesn't look aesthetically charming. And then also it's not symmetric. Buildings are beautiful. You're going to ruin it. That's the way I see it. So I'm thinking that maybe if you can do something like in the front, or the other idea is having two, like both on the west side and east side, so it looks symmetric. Like now we made some adjustment because of the COVID. We had to now make some change. That's something that we don't want to see it on Big Beaver Road. I mean, that's my opinion. Thank you.
So again, just to
make it symmetric, both sides. I know that our planning commission.
It is, could be possible if he so desires, and we can incorporate to have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with the
same
height.
retail that's on the east to have it, on the west to have it on the east.
Right.
And have that symmetrical.
And then some more gardening or maybe some other things in front so that it looks nice. Because, the next door is the Troy Sports Complex. I mean, that's a lively place. I don't think that is, and then there are a lot of people that live there. After that, there is no like a grocery store or anything. Only thing we have is the gas station, right? So
I actually see residents, because I'm there every single day.
Right.
They're wondering why I hang out there all the time. They walk their dogs, they walk to the retail spaces, they don't just jump in their car. I see it all the time, people walking back.
One more comment I want to make is, when I went there, I see that west side buildings have the most residents. Is it right?
The building 1 and 2 on the west are completed, so they're fully occupied.
And I kind of feel like they like to have the storefronts in front of them, and they would like that. I don't know how it doesn't make sense to me that they would like to, give you the opinion that they should have more. So anyway, think about it. So we can make it more aesthetically beautiful.
We do have an elevation looking at the south side and the west side, so it shows that it's storefront with. Thank you.
I think this picture really shows what we're looking at. And again, the idea of, maybe flipping it from the east side to the west side, I think it's personally, I think it's more leasable this way because I think the access is much better on the west side, but we can.
You know your business well. We don't want to, we're not designers here. We're not trying to design it on the fly. But I just suggestions.
We just want to understand the concerns, and if they can be addressed, that's what we're here to try to do.
And again, we did do the, the storefront glass there to kind of.
Right, and this elevation looks better.
To identify it.
I can guarantee, this place is pretty crowded place. With the sports complex and all these things, so don't think about the customers. And this is COVID time, it's going to go away pretty soon. But I think it will be good, and especially for those apartment dwellers, they would like to go there and do something. That's the mixed living, right? Mixed use concept.
Yeah. So again, I could picture a first watch type place in here. And I think the place would be a slam dunk. And
Mr. Lambert.
Yeah.
We're going to move this along because some of us have to wake up in the morning and work. Go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
I don't want to micromanage a project either, but kind of as follow up with Chairman Krent's suggestion of flipping it to the east side, especially if there's going to be an outdoor dining area, might meet the spirit of what we're looking for in a mixed-use development. So that's just my suggestion as a follow-up.
It's just traffic,
Yeah. I mean,
when you're approaching a building going 45 miles an hour, what are you going to do? You've got a half a second to make a decision.
It's something.
Does it look inviting, or does it look like a house?
Right.
And then, just a quick thought. Go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
Nothing.
Got it. Mr. Faison.
Totally different question. I had a question on like the leasing activity and the lease up. You mentioned it being strong. So would you add some color to that? And I was also curious to know kind of the demographics of the tenants, younger folks, older folks, families.
I think we have at least 15 different kinds of dog breeds. But the good news for me, because I was the contractor, is when the leasing people who have way more experience in managing and operating and leasing apartments, when they tell me, oh, we've never seen anybody do this before, or this is a feature that people love. And when people walk into the building, we don't have to sell it. It sells itself. We didn't even talk about, we have a beautiful rooftop amenity on Building 1 that we'd love to have everybody come and see, because it's just beautiful to be up there and see the city. And there's a little lounge where if it's raining, you can go inside. There's restrooms, so if you came over from another building, you don't have to go back to your building. If you need The restrooms are there, there's furniture outside, there's a barbecue grill. I mean, it's very, very nice. So when I hear about, well, a PUD doesn't mean a specific thing, it's like all the things. How about all the residents that we're looking at Royal Oak or we're looking at other communities and all of a sudden they want to be in Troy and they want to take advantage of other features that the city has. So the leasing has been very good, and both the completed buildings are fully occupied, and they have a lot of people lined up for the buildings 3 and 4 that are, we're still under construction on. And we believe that the additional space would lease up, and also more of a reason for the retailers, whether that's east side, west side, or both. It's like, well, I was questioning, but now all of a sudden there's more units, they're full, there's lots of different demographics between age and income and ethnicity. It's just great to see a mix of everything.
Let me touch on that one real quick, because that's a great question. So I'm going to try to make it brief. Going back to the beginning, we didn't know who the demographics were. We didn't know who we were going to get, and Brent and I and Ben had gone back and forth, and that's when we brought Village Green on, and they're the experts. They're the apartment gurus. So we fine-tuned the plan, and we changed our unit mix, and there was questions of, do we want to put elevators or don't we? We have 4 buildings. So in these 4 buildings, Village Green said we absolutely do not need elevators. And I said, well, again, if I'm a person living in there and I want a 3rd floor unit, maybe I don't want to walk up the stairs, right? So we're going to be turning people away. So the idea was to build to accommodate everybody. Handicap, somebody that wants a 1st floor unit, somebody that wants a 3rd floor unit that doesn't want to have anyone living above them, somebody that wants an elevator. So there's different buildings, different features, and that has helped us attract a wide variety of people. We have some families, we have single people, we have married couples, newlyweds. So it's kind of, I think that part of what we did was to try to build something to attract everybody, and I think that's what we got.
So last question, like the price point for like a 1-bedroom apartment, what would that be?
Oh, man. Don't put me on the record here.
But okay, I thought that was
yeah, you know what? We've got studios, 1, 2, and 3s, but I think that the price range for a 1-bedroom has been between $1,300 to $1,450.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts for the applicants before we move a resolution? Seeing no other thoughts, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Resolution, please. Who would like to make the resolution?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
For, Mr. Carlisle and Mr. Sabadan? I'm looking at the resolution, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but is there any way that we can make a resolution that would, like I said, I don't want to do a design job on the fly, but I did like I felt like it was a bit more of a compromise to ask them to do, to develop the west and the east side. So I don't know if that means that would double it to 4,000 square feet of retail space, and then let them figure out how many apartment units that would leave over, if that's a bad idea, a good idea, but that's sort of what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
Well, the concern, that I would echo Mr. Nader's concern that we haven't, we studied the application that was before us.
Okay.
Not one that has double the commercial. So at this time, I can't sit here and tell you that the parking is going to work. I would want to make sure that, that if your motion was something to the effect of, consider this or something like that, kind of loose, that would give us an opportunity to check parking. But again, Mr. Nader has expressed reservations about the parking. So we would have to look at it from an ordinance standpoint, at the very least.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Public comment required yet on this?
This is a public hearing. Yes, it is.
Good catch. I forgot about it as well.
Yes. All right. Before the resolution, we're going to have a public hearing. So anyone from the audience would like to step forward and talk about this item, your comments? Seeing none, we'll go back to the resolution.
I just want to add and support what Ms. Parkas is saying is like if we can do it on both sides, then it would be aesthetically more charming. And I don't know if so is that something we can put in the resolution?
Now, you can, whoever moves the resolution can word it just as they want. So, but that said, like, if you word it so that you're saying, well, let's have it in a range from 2,000 to 4,000 square feet of retail.
Right.
Then there's a parking issue that has to be resolved, and we can't.
So we can optimize it to make it 1,500 each side.
No, don't start designing it from the floor.
Or we can just approve the parking with the variance. There are multiple ways we can make it, we are intentionally allowing more apartments, and it's okay, so, but then if I am, at this time, when I pass by, it would look like some modifications was made on the building. It doesn't look aesthetic anymore.
So your point is?
My point is, can we make the retail space, can we make it symmetric, like both sides? Because we supported east and west both. You supported east, I supported west, and then now both sides. That's basically the idea. Mr. Savile, seems like you have at least I want to hear from,
If you'd like to make a resolution on that, please.
Yeah, of course we can do that.
And I just want to remind the Planning Commission you're a recommending body for this. So any resolution you make is non-binding. It is a recommendation.
Absolutely. Okay. You want me to make a resolution?
Yes, but don't forget about the parking.
Okay. No, that's something that we'll figure out. This is the recommendation, right? I don't want to count how many parking spots we need.
There's always unintended consequences when you make something from a fly like this, but go ahead.
PUD, right?
While Mr. Rahman is gathering his thoughts, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
We, as part of this site plan that's going before the Planning Commission and City Council, they also have to amend the PUD agreement. Perhaps a recommendation of the Planning Commission could be to encourage the developer to consider, additional square footage of retail, provided the parking is going to work.
Yeah.
And maybe the PUD agreement is amended to allow flexibility of both ends.
Sounds good to me. Go ahead.
So it's not binding, it's opening the door. If the market, Mr. Nager walks out of this room and the market changes tomorrow and there's a market for 2 retail spaces, the PUD agreement would allow for flexibility to fill that space, but it's a non-binding part of the PUD agreement, provided the parking works. Again, huge capital letters, provided parking works.
Okay, yeah, and parking has to, Okay, so how does it work out? So it gets at the end that.
Well, there's stuff in the middle about 2,000, so you got to reword it as.
Okay, so it's pretty easy, right? So 25 units is not going to change. Hopefully not, or I don't know. If I make it 22,000 to 4,000, that will change. Like it will be 23 unit. I estimate.
Again, you're designing it on the fly, and that's not a good idea. So make it as flexible as you can as you word it.
Like the numbers are here.
I would avoid pinning down.
Okay, adjust the number of apartments accordingly. Is that a right way of saying it?
And let me stick my nose into this.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
We are not designers of apartment buildings with square footage. They've asked us to amend it to provide for retail and residential. I think the resolution is fine as it is. When we start designing this, I have problems with this. And I'm going to vote against a resolution if that's what's coming out.
This is a PUD, and it's on Big Beaver, right? So Big Beaver district requires 50%. No, it's not on Big Beaver.
No, it's not in the Big Beaver. It's not in the Big Beaver district. You're confusing too many things here.
Okay.
So, would you like to just read your resolution? We'll vote on it.
Okay. So. whereas the applicant,
You have to start at the beginning. Well, go ahead. No, it's, okay. Never mind, go ahead. Just go ahead.
thank you, whereas the applicant, Nahor Companies, submitted an application to amend Troy Crossing Planned Unit Development, PUD, also known as the Phoenix Troy Apartments, located on the north side of Big Beaver, east of John R. In Section 24, approximately 4.77 acres in area, and whereas Troy Crossing PUD was approved as a mixed-use development, including 4 three-story apartment buildings and 2 retail/restaurant facilities, and whereas the applicant has proposed to replace the 2 approved one-story retail restaurant facilities with one-story building featuring whatever possible apartment we can make, and 4,000 square feet of retail restaurant on the ground floor on both sides, east and west. Whereas the proposed 3-story building is similar in design to the 4 buildings on site which are nearing completion, and whereas the proposed revision to the PUD meets the standards for approval set forth in Section 11.03. Be it resolved that the Planning Commission recommends to City Council that a concept development plan approval and preliminary development plan approval for the proposed amendment to the Troy Crossing PUD, also known as the Phoenix Troy Apartments, be granted.
Okay, there was one part of the statement you read that said 1 building featuring, you didn't say 1 3-story building, so do you want to include that?
Okay, yeah.
In your wording, as printed? Okay.
1 3-story building, yes.
Yep. Okay, that's fine. All right, do we have a second on this resolution? Go ahead, Ms. Parakis. Ms. Parakis seconded. Any discussion before the vote?
Mr.
Go
Chair,
ahead.
Just a question. So is the resolution stating we're only approving it with 4,000 square feet of retail space?
I didn't quite catch your numbers there.
I didn't know if it was about flexibility or if it was a requirement.
Yeah. I didn't quite catch the wording on that. How did you?
So as it is, I just said 4,000 square feet.
Okay, you want.
And then, Mr. Savin, you want to say that a proposal, right? So we propose, or should I add a word there to make it not like a?
Okay. So I don't want to prolong this meeting, but I don't know what to do with that resolution. So I'm going to be working with Mr. Nager's attorney on a PUD agreement. And I don't know, is your attorney here tonight or no? No. Okay. So if we're going to say, if I understood Mr. Rahman's resolution, it's proposing to build whatever number of units he can and 4,000 square feet of retail on the ground floor. I'm not sure what that PUD agreement looks like. So from my perspective, and I think from Mr. Nager's perspective, at least probably his attorney's perspective, we need to know what we're approving here. And it doesn't sound like Mr. Nager is in agreement with the 4,000 square feet. So if he gets a recommendation to go to City Council with 4,000 square feet, I'm not sure Mr. Nager goes to City Council with that. I think the goal here is to have a project that's workable and feasible. So I need some better direction from this board on how they want this PUD, if it's going to be amended, how it's going to be amended.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
The resolution, as read, also says that Mr. Nager has proposed that development, and he has not.
Has proposed what?
Yeah, he said, whereas the applicant has proposed to replace this 2 approved one-story built facilities with the facility that Mr. Rahman is proposing, and that's not
Mr. Nader's proposal.
That's not Mr. Nader's proposal, exactly.
Yeah. Mr. Hudson, you're ready to say something.
Yeah, I'm ready to say something again. I don't like in that resolution, if it is straightened out, requiring the applicant to have an east and west retail window. he's the developer. He's got the project. How we sit here after a half hour or 45 minutes of deciding how we might like to see that building is irrelevant. And I'm going to vote against that resolution if it comes out as a resolution for a vote.
Okay. Do we have a second on that resolution yet? Ms. Parakis did second it. Okay. So, all right. So that all said, any other comments before a vote? Ms. Malala Holly.
I know where Mr. Rahman is coming on this. I understand what his idea or intention is, that balancing of the retail space on both ends. But I do not know whether that specific 4,000 square feet, I cannot support that resolution because we are tying some ropes around this. I'd like to keep it very flexible with the word encourage for any more retail space, try to keep it balanced if possible. Again, it is what their architect, their designers, their civil engineers will work on it if possible. That is how I would like to keep it open-ended.
Okay. Mr. Roush.
Yes. Can our city attorney tell us whether we can even vote on a resolution that is not correct?
Oh, well, okay, a resolution that's not correct?
Yes, the applicant didn't propose.
Right. No, you would have to amend that language
Before a vote.
a little bit before a vote, yes.
Okay. So we can't run a roll call yet until we amend that resolution to take the proper context of who's making the recommendation.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
There's various ways to do that. I understand, like, I agree with Lakshmi, Ms. Malala Holly. I understand the intent. If it was me on the planning commission, what I would do, because I heard a couple things. I heard encouraging additional landscaping is one of the things. I heard encouraging the retail space on the east side versus the west side. Encouraging, these are constructive, positive words, non-binding, and encouraging additional retail. So I think if it was me, I would move the resolution as proposed of support with the following design considerations. One, encouraging additional landscaping, encouraging flipping the retail, and encouraging additional retail space in the building provided parking works, provided parking is supportable.
That's
so it keeps it as written, adds design considerations so the various concerns are addressed, but it's encouraging and non-binding, and City Council will consider those.
Good. You know, because we do have a resolution on the floor and it's been seconded, we have to follow through with that technically. And since it's a resolution with errors at this point, pointed out by Mr. Roush, how do we delete that? Or we just, or do we have to amend that and then delete it? Or, you know, what's the process?
Ms. Dufresne, could the motion maker withdraw the motion before the vote?
Yes.
If the motion maker agreed with other approaches?
There you go. There's an out. You want it?
Yeah, so I like Mr. Savidan's idea, and that's what I was thinking, that, you know, if we can add an additional item, it will be a little bit easier, because otherwise it just doesn't fit in with this current resolution.
Would you like to make the new resolution?
Or somebody can help me out with whatever.
Or somebody else would like to make the resolution?
Yeah.
Mr. Lambert,
Yeah,
our
I'll give it a shot,
our stalwart resolution person.
Did the seconder withdraw her second?
Yes, absolutely.
Technically, we're not supposed to do that, but we're not going to be that stickler procedure. All right, let me give it a shot based upon the recommendations from our Mr. Savidan. Whereas the applicant Najer Companies submitted an application to amend the Troy Crossing PUD, also known as the Phoenix Troy Apartments, located on the north side of Big Beaver, east of John R., in Section 24, approximately 4.77 acres in area, and whereas the Troy Crossing PUD was approved as a mixed-use development, including 4 three-story apartment buildings and 2 retail restaurant facilities, and whereas the applicant has proposed to replace the 2 approved 1-story retail restaurant facilities with one-story building featuring 25 apartment units and 2,000 square feet of retail restaurant on the ground floor. And whereas the proposed three-story building is similar in design to the 4 buildings on site which are nearing completion, and whereas the proposed revision to the PUD meets the standards for approval set forth in section 11.03, and whereas we encourage the applicant to enhance the landscaping, to consider moving the retail restaurant space to the east side of the building, and encourage the applicant to increase the amount of retail restaurant space on the ground floor up to 4,000 square feet. And be it further resolved that the Planning Commission recommends to City Council that concept development plan approval and preliminary development plan approval for the proposed amendment to Troy Crossing PUD, also known as the Phoenix Troy Apartments, be granted.
Do we have a second on that one? Mr. Roush? Seconded. Now, any discussion before the roll call? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Chagel? Oh, sorry, Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krantz?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. It will turn out to be something you'll be proud of.
I'm sure it will be. Okay, next item is another public hearing. We've got conditional rezoning, CR JPLN 2021-001, proposed Pine View condominiums west side of DeQuinder, north of Long Lake, 88-20-12-476-070, Section 12, from NN Neighborhood Node J and EP Environmental Protection to NN Neighborhood Node J. Presenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little background of this project. The Planning Commission has seen this project before. It's coming back in a little bit different form based on direction from the Planning Commission. The subject site is located on the west side of DeQuinder, between 18 Mile and English Drive. The site is outlined in red. It's approximately a little over 2 acres in area. It's vacant and currently undeveloped. There is a 40-foot wide strip of EP Environmental Protection Zone property that borders the north end of the property, and the applicant is seeking a conditional rezone that EP portion of the site to neighborhood node in order to use that portion of that EP strip zoning as landscaping and guest parking area. The Planning Commission did previously consider this, and a site plan application was presented. The Planning Commission at that time appeared generally in favor of the application, but noted, the applicant did note a desire to use that EP portion of the site for guest parking. It came to the applicant's attention during this process that they were not allowed to use EP portion of the site for guest parking, as parking's not allowed in the EP. The applicant then at that point offered to remove the guest parking and basically remove the guest parking from the site. The Planning Commission felt that the guest parking was a worthy addition to the site and to the development itself, and so the applicant is coming back tonight for a conditional rezoning to rezone that portion of EP to use it as guest parking, as was shown in the previous application. So the layout and design has not changed since the last time the Planning Commission has seen it. The EP zoning line is that shown in purple. As noted, they want to use that portion for guest parking, sidewalk, as well as a landscape buffer for the adjacent properties to the north. The townhome portion of the development, which is everything south of the EP line, is a permitted by right use in the neighborhood node zoning. So the site plan itself is proposed at 25 attached townhome units. Is accessed off a shared drive that will also that's used by Taco Bell. The buildings will have direct access off the internal road system, and each will have a 2-car garage within each unit. This is a conditional rezoning. As noted, there are 10 conditions offered by the applicant. I'm not going to go through each one, but I've underlined the ones that I think are pertinent for the Planning Commission's discussion. So first off, the site plan itself is a condition of approval. Number 4, the maximum building height is 2.5 stories. Number 7, the building material will be a mix of brick, asphalt, plank siding, and a variety of color palettes, and a low, durable, low maintenance free material. And then 8, each unit will have a 2-car garage, so a minimum 10 guest parking spaces will be provided. Again, these are conditions offered by the applicant as part of the application. With regards to the bulk, what I consider bulk standards of setback and height, it does comply with all the neighborhood node requirements. And again, the height at 2.5 stories was a voluntary condition of the applicant. The applicant has provided landscaping in compliance with the ordinance requirements. The only thing we note is along the southern property line, they would like to use a fence rather than required landscaping. The Planning Commission has the authority to approve an alternative of screening than what the ordinance requires, which is landscaping, and so they're asking for that relief and do it via a fence versus landscaping. The engineering department has reviewed the application. In terms of circulation and access, they don't have any concerns. They did have some comments with regards to pedestrian circulation. There are 3 comments. They asked to add additional sidewalks around some of the units, extend a crosswalk further to the west of the project in order to accommodate those that are adjacent to the Taco Bell property, and lastly, add some emphasis to the crosswalk markings to make it more distinguishable. Proposed rendering of the building. This on the right is the front elevation. The one on the left is the left elevation. Right elevation on the left, and then the rear elevation with the garages behind. Proposed rendering of how the building would look. We do find that the project meets the note of standards set forth in section 5.06E and does meet the conditional rezoning standards set forth in section 16. And so in summary, we're asking the Planning Commission to consider the use of a fence in replacement of the required screen along the southern edge. And then based on that discussion, we do recommend Planning Commission recommend approval based on the following conditions. Submit a photometric plan and fixture details. Address the engineering department regarding pedestrian connection, provide site landscaping calculation, and as well as work out a conditional rezoning agreement between the city and the applicant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Hudson.
Mr. Carlisle, what uses are permitted in an environmental protected zone?
Really nothing.
Why are we allowing guest parking?
Well, that's why we're here tonight, is because they want to get rid of the EP zoning to allow for guest parking. Because
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
when they came in, Mr. Hudson, just to be clear, they came in with basically this exact same site plan before, and it couldn't be approved because they had guest parking in that EP zoning.
Okay.
The Planning Commission said, in concept, we mostly like this, we support this, but you couldn't approve it because of the guest parking. So they came back with the conditional rezoning that they would rezone that portion of that northern strip from EP to neighborhood node to allow for guest parking.
I understand. Silly question then.
It's late. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle before we hear from the developer? Go ahead.
Just one question. I know that from last time, I think that you mentioned that that EP zone, that slice of property was a separator between the commercial neighborhood node and the residential. Is that still? I vaguely remember that. Is that true? Mr. Savid, and maybe you.
The EP district was used as a zoning tool as well as the parking district to separate incompatible land uses. Just a little bit of history, just to piggyback. November 12, 2019. Mr. Abathera, who's present this evening, presented a site plan with the same number of units. And a comment was made by one of the planning commissioners who's no longer on the planning commission. And her comment was, I like it. I think you can do better. I'm looking forward to seeing your A game. And Mr. Abathera, I'm kind of summarizing the back and forth. He said, it would really help me a lot if I were able to use the EP for guest parking and enhanced landscaping. Because if you look at the aerial, which is laid under the zoning, there's not much there in the way of landscaping. It's EP in name only. It really doesn't have many outstanding natural features. So Gary's proposed to add additional guest parking to as an amenity to the residents, as well as add more landscaping to make it a better EP district and a better buffer. So that's what he's proposing this evening.
I have a follow-up question for Mr. Savidan. So when you say EP zone, who manages the property, like clean up and all this?
It depends who owns it and if there's any conservation easement or any management responsibilities.
For that specific property, anybody managing it? Because I went there yesterday, it looked really bad, right? So.
But just, yeah, well, the owner's right here, you can ask him what he does to manage it.
Any other thoughts before we bring up the applicant? Seeing none, Mr. Applicant.
Good evening tonight. Thank you for seeing my case. As
Gary, introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Gary Abathera, and I'm the developer of this property here. The first thing I have to get out is my letter to the Planning Commission, to Brent, does not, his first letter came out, said 2.5 stories. It was a misprint. It is still a 3-story operation. There's still 3 stories in there, not 2.5 stories, because I started back in November 2019. So I want to make sure that it's one of our conditions as 2.5 stories, and the new letter came out, and I think it got put in the packet wrong. So it should have said 3 stories. I want to make sure that's out front.
For a condition?
Yes, for the condition.
Got it.
Second thing is I came back. If you remember, I was at the meeting. Some of you are still here. I kept the same amount of units. I know Mr. Rahman said as long as you don't go over 25, he's good with it. Mrs. Cruz said get rid of the EP. So we came in and put the landscaping and everything in there that everybody asked for. And one other person, I forget who it was, wanted me to change the elevations up for younger people. So I did that, and it makes it look more for younger people than for older people in the units. So those 3 other conditions that we have in there are minor, and we can take care of those very simple. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Abathera? Go ahead.
Just to piggyback on that, so again, when Mr. Abathera was before the Planning Commission November 19, it was the same number of units. The height was, Mr. Abathera, you were going to confirm the height of the renderings that you gave today.
I think it was 34 feet.
34 feet. Now, you were all aware that there was a text amendment that was adopted by City Council end of May 2021, which would be effective in early June, June 4th, I think it was effective, limiting the height in neighborhood node when abutting single-family residential. Mr. Abathera submitted the conditional rezoning application prior to that deadline, so he is whole in terms of being able to continue with the 34-foot, 3-story buildings. It was submitted prior to the text amendment. He was monitoring the status of that text amendment very closely. If you recall, the proposed language was moved forward from the Planning Commission, I want to say December or January of December 2019 or January 2020, around that time. And we didn't have a Planning Commission public hearing for like over a year. So it's been it's been odd times, obviously, that's an understatement, but I just want to clarify that for this project, he's able to submit as with 3 stories, 34 feet, because it was submitted prior to the amendment, going before City Council. And also that was the intent from the beginning when he was before Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission he basically said, if we eliminate EP, we can use it for parking and landscaping, it's still going to be essentially the same, just better if we conditionally rezone EP. So that was the intent in 2019. I would add that Mr. Abathera has worked closely with the neighbors. I don't know how many are in attendance this evening. There's no more than 2. But I think he's made an effort to keep them informed all along the way. So, but it is a public hearing, and if anyone here wants to speak, we'll hear from them.
Absolutely. Good. Ms. Barakas.
I just have one question. Those houses on the west, I guess, do you know how many stories those are?
5114 is a story and a half, 5096 is a ranch, and I think 5082 might be a ranch also.
Okay, thank you.
And at our last meeting, 5114 came up and spoke that he was in favor of the project.
Okay.
He was the only person that came here.
Good to know, thank you.
Ms. Malala Holly.
Just a quick question about the entrance. I know there's a shared driveway or road between Taco Bell and your proposed development. Will we have enough space there in terms of traffic movement, considering Taco Bell, they're open till 2 o'clock in the night, pretty heavy traffic sometimes into that restaurant or fast food chain. So do you have enough?
Well, this property was all developed with Taco Bell. So the entrance to Taco Bell was designed for the property in the back also.
Okay.
So it has been, and that's why when you said that it looks a little rough in landscaping, that's
Yeah.
Taco Bell that needs to maintain that landscaping there, and I've been reaching out to them, but, it's COVID and they're not very responsive, but there's the one who are maintaining that, because that's their retention pond for the property, which has cross-access easements, cross-access maintenance on it.
And there is a wall that is on the end of that EP area, am I correct? There's a wall with some trees, because when I was there, I was looking at that area, and there is a wall there too.
Correct.
And that is still going to remain with all the trees around in that area, all that, right? Okay.
There's a landscape plan that came with Taco Bell, and they still have money in escrow to make sure that their landscaping is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Yes, I didn't see an elevation that shows the side of the building that faces the street or alley that has the garage on it and the entrance as well. Is it my understanding that the buildings that would be on the western boundary and eastern boundary, the entrance is going to be on the roadway side?
Yes, that is going to be the front, and
There'll be a garage door and
the front door.
And a front door.
So the units are a little bit wider to take care of the garage door and the front door. But we designed that from the last meeting so we did not have anybody walking in the backyards to get to the front of their houses between Taco Bell and the 7 residents that are behind us. So we want to keep.
I didn't understand the last
one
statement you said about at the front of the house.
Well, normally the garage is on one in the
Right.
front door's on the front, garage is on the back.
Right.
The units that back up to the existing neighbors, we have the front door and the garage door on the front. So the backyards are just patios. So we have patios next to patios, existing homes.
Okay.
So we're not putting front doors in the back where people walk in the backyard to walk into the front of their house.
I understand.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
Mr. Heffner, you want to have a fence on the south side of the property primarily because you're facing like a fast food place and a dentist's office, I think,
Yes.
so, okay. Thank you.
I'd like to have the opportunity to put the fence up there instead.
Mr. Hudson.
Oh, sorry.
You have anything? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Farrar.
Sorry, I did have one more question. There's a house to the north, and it looked to me, I don't know if we can see the picture, but it's a really long property. So really, yeah, thank you. So really, we're talking about putting those parking spots. There's really nothing behind it where headlights would go into a house or anything. It's just,
Where it says 41203,
Yeah.
house is up there. There's a garage, maybe 40 feet behind.
Yeah,
and
I see it.
It's all just open space. It's just open land all the way through there. So with us putting trees in there, the headlights will be blocked by those. But there is no houses back there. It's just grass that sheep mows.
okay, thank you.
So, okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Rahman.
So that wall that we have doesn't go all the way to back, right?
Correct. That concrete wall only goes where maybe the first 100 feet.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Which was negotiated when Taco Bell went in, with a retention
Right.
pond and landscaping.
Now, when we have the other construction, then do you think that wall will be extended up to the end?
No, I'd rather
No?
put the trees and landscaping.
Trees and, okay, that's better.
I don't like concrete walls
Yeah,
that
yeah,
much.
yeah. So there will be some
Yes.
trees and
Yes.
landscaping, okay?
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Just a quick question, Mr. Hebethera. What does that fence look like on the southern?
I was going to use a white vinyl fence in there.
A white vinyl fence,
Yes.
all right. Rough, what's the height of that?
6 feet.
6 feet, okay.
So I think that might be code, is that, yeah,
Okay, just wanted quick input on that because I didn't see it in the drawings. So.
okay.
All right, ready for resolution?
Public hearing?
Pardon?
Public.
Oh, public hearing, thank you again, yes. It's getting late for me even. Public hearing, anyone that wishes to address this issue, please come forward. State your name and sign in, please. And your address.
My name is Pamela Pruitt. I live at 41203 DeQuinder. I'm the property abutting the EP property or area. So I have lived there since 1979. and I was here for the meeting to make that EP, and I was very grateful they did. But I've got a couple issues. First of all is the issue of safety. All right, that entrance with Kroger on the other side, and at night, Taco Bell sometimes is lined up across my driveway for the drive-through. Not to mention, just a couple months ago, there was a very bad accident. Someone coming out from Kroger and someone pulling out from Taco Bell, and it was horrible. If you guys could please look into safety. I mean, it's just, sometimes when I come, well, when I was driving, you know, I'm working from home now, but I would have to go past my house because people were coming down to pull into Kroger. I mean, it is dangerous. I mean, please look at the safety issue on this. You know, when he purchased this property, he knew it was EP, and he knew it was landlocked. That's the only entrance to that property. Frank used to own it, and he purchased it from Frank like it is. Lots of accidents. I mean, please look at the safety. Second issue is the current green space. You know, it was beautiful. It has not been mowed in 2 years. There are trees that are dead. There's a pine that's dead. There are weed trees growing in the pines. I appreciated you guys both seeing that. He put a bunch of dirt abutting the back of my property, and now it's tall weeds. It was dirt, but now it's, you know, I don't know how many feet of weeds. So, I mean, if that's not maintained, I mean, it was maintained when Frank owned it, and for a little while it was taken care of. Also, the fire hydrant in the front, when the fire hydrant before DeQuinder was widened and the fire hydrant was in the ditch, I would mow it, I would shovel it. It's sitting on a sidewalk by a curb, and they can't even mow it. There's an area this big that's grass. So I'm just concerned about the maintenance, but it was EP when he purchased it, and I think it should remain that. That's what the council promised me when I was here in this very room when it went through. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, council. Thank you. My name is Doug Roach. I live in the property that is, can't see it on the screen, but it's further, it's the first house beyond the open space. And my primary topic is I trust the judgment of this commission. First of all, I do want to thank you for the fact that I even got this notice of awareness regarding this, this topic being considered. But from my point of view, I certainly second the concerns of safety and congestion and the topics that are there. But from my perspective, where I reside, any parking where lights shine that way, I can certainly speak anecdotally for my neighbors. There's already a concern about the amount of light noise that shines even with the land space between there and my property. And having headlights and other things that are going to shine directly there would be a significant disruption to our privacy and the residential privacy that we have. So while I can't determine the judgment or direction you want to go with a project like this, I can certainly say that whatever the boundary conditions of the EP are, certainly to ensure that the protection of light noise and other kinds of disruptions to the properties, the adjacent neighbor, and or others that may be a little further away like myself, are of great concern. The fact that this is a 3-story building versus I guess the legislated, you know, lower height buildings now for the city, the additional, in the spirit of the earlier conversation related to your topic related to Livernois and all of these multi-unit constructions. I appreciate your consideration on that. So while it's not my place to discuss somebody's business, it is, as a resident there, to express my sincere concern about protecting all of those residents on all sides from the disruption that a property would bring, including, and I can't say enough about the light noise and those kinds of things. They are really terribly disruptive. If any of you live near or in a place where, for instance, today there's an Arby's there and there is a light that is so bright that it shines a shadow hundreds of feet away, and yet it's very hard to govern these things. And so that is of greatest concern to my wife and I, and anecdotally certainly to the neighbors that live near me. Thank you for hearing me out. Much appreciated.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Quick question for staff regarding the traffic issues that Ms. Pruitt, I believe, brought up about blocking her driveway. Is that a police issue, or how do we, is there any resolution to that?
Oh, I will say we do send these around to for interdepartmental reviews. Traffic was not an issue that was identified by our interdepartmental review. That being said, we can certainly go back and coordinate with engineering about ways to address this, and so it would be in coordination with engineering, police, and we would have to confirm if DeQuinder, I think, is a county road. And so we would have to confirm with the road commission as well about coordinating any potential issues or improvements. And part of it too would also be working with Taco Bell on potential traffic management with their own site too. Because looking at it, it looks like there's sufficient parking in terms of stacking in terms of zoning requirements, but it could be just a function of how traffic is being routed in and out through the site. So it's a multifaceted approach that we would take to address the traffic issue.
Thank you.
It's the first that I'm aware of it, but we can certainly, if this moves forward, we'll have engineering, like Ben said, have engineering look at it.
Okay. So I'll bring it up. We got to close the public hearing first. That was part of the public hearing. I just wanted to address their issues. I'll formally close the public hearing, seeing no other in the audience. So now we'll bring it back to our commission and start. First hand was, okay, Ms. Parakis, go ahead.
Okay. One of the questions, I guess, is for Mr. Savadan and Mr. Carlisle. I never know which one of you would answer, but regarding the photometrics and the light pollution, I thought we had rules on that to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I'm a little bit concerned to hear that that is a concern. I guess I just learned that the wall doesn't go all the way across. And then I was told that the lights wouldn't be an issue because it's an empty property, but maybe that was a little bit naive because I suppose people a little bit to the west and further down would have some issues. So, so there's that. And then the one other question I have, which I think relates, is it my understanding that we can, I know we're just recommending this, but that the resolution can not recommend the rezoning of the EP, but allow the rest of it to go on? Because it sounded to me, you kind of mentioned it earlier in the presentation, that perhaps the visitor parking, the guest parking is nice, but it's not even required. So we could deny that, proceed, and just say, they'll just not put the parking in. I mean, I'm not recommending that, I'm just asking the question.
We don't have a specific standard or specific requirement for guest parking. Just as a practical matter, when we have applications, it's just good design to have additional guest parking. So I think it's something that we'd like to see. We, the staff and planning commission, would like to see guest parking in applications. Now there's certainly ways to, I heard the resident loud and clear, the concern of light, going into their home. I totally get that. There are ways through design to make sure that doesn't happen. Can I answer the question?
Absolutely.
Respond. So regarding the light at Arby's that shines on the property, we've got around approximately 30,000 parcels in the city of Troy. We've got 2 code enforcement officers who go home at 4:30 at night. So they're not out in the evening, but I believe we do have a police officer who has the ability to read light with a light meter and can investigate these kind of things. But if we don't receive a complaint, we can't investigate. So it's the first I've heard of the light spill. I would encourage you, sir, contact me tomorrow. Contact the planning department and ask for Brent, and we'll investigate it. It's you shouldn't have to tolerate that. That's not acceptable, and we do have standards, and we will enforce on those requirements.
As you say, in the evening, it's hard to police that at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
With regards to the issue about directly about the issue of guests, so If the EP does get rezoned and you do allow for guest parking, a fairly easy solution to address light spillover from the parking itself would be having the applicant or requiring the applicant to either put a low hedgerow right adjacent to the end of the parking, or even a 3-foot tall screen wall or knee wall, and that would block the headlights for the most part, in addition to the significant landscaping they have along the northern property line as well. So there are some design solutions to get around the issue of headlight screening. That wouldn't necessarily block potential second and third story windows that face out, but there's only 6 units that actually face northern into those northern properties.
Go ahead, Mr. Savalle.
I also heard the concerns of the neighbor immediately to the north, faced closer to DeQuinder, and I'm wondering, Ms. Dufresne, if this is conditionally rezoned, could there be language in the conditional rezoning agreement that provide more maintenance responsibility for that portion, that landscape portion along the north? Can we firm that up and provide some more teeth or something to that effect?
Well, that's something that Mr. Ebetheria would have to offer as a voluntary condition.
Yeah, well, he's listening. He's listening right now. So,
any other thoughts? Go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
Just one question. The concern that was raised about not allowing or keeping the EP zoning in place. One concern I have is if we were to keep that in place, would that pedestrian sidewalk be allowed to be built in that area or not? And I think keeping that there is an important facet of the property.
we'd have to look into that, Mr. Lambert. I don't deal with this district very often.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Yes. I didn't see in the staff's presentation or the materials that were presented that this was a neighborhood node B designation. And in the description for neighborhood node B, it says, quote, transitional smaller scale employment-based mixed use. The building form that essentially they would be using would be building form C, and the building forms were a series of potential developments that progressively got more intensive. Building form C reads in section 5.03B1, building form C, this category is primarily designed for attached residential or live-work residential units, townhouses, and urban-style residential developments that are compatible with higher density urban character are the primary buildings permitted under this building form. So this is the third most dense building form in the form base. The next one after that requires buildings between 3 and 6 stories. It's only for those large of buildings. I don't see this as a higher density urban character neighborhood, as the adjacent properties are single-family ranch homes and single-story businesses. As a result, I don't believe the building form is suitable for this site. I don't believe that this plan is transitional, as the Troy Master Plan describes on page 67, quote, transitional density, the missing middle market offers an opportunity to create housing at densities which fall between traditional single family and multiple family. I don't see this as being between the two. This is at the extreme. This is multifamily townhouses, 3 stories tall. In addition to that, we have an issue here with a neighbor saying that traffic backs up, blocking her driveway, trying to get into Taco Bell. How is traffic going to be able to get into the residences if they can't get in the driveway to Taco Bell? As a result, I don't believe that this use in this form is suitable for this location. Furthermore, our master plan survey has told us that the residents don't want to see this kind of townhouse use. I could go on and talk about section 506.31A, but I don't know that that's necessary to describe the reasons that this should not go forward.
Okay, anyone else?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Ms. Malala Holly.
I'm going to reiterate my earlier comment about the entry point for this apartment or townhome complex being shared with Taco Bell. My whole point was asking about traffic density, movement of traffic in and out of that location, along with residents having the same driveway as an access. I still do not know how the density is going to be handled, and now we hear from our fellow resident that the road gets blocked to access Taco Bell. I want us to be very clear. We are building homes here for people who are going to reside. This is their safe zone. This is their coming back from work zone. And we don't want it to be a very chaotic entry. And we know how Taco Bell works and functions. Sometimes they are very busy. There is no parking spot on their property sometimes, and I can see why they would back out into the street. So I'm still going back to that same thing, because when I was there, that's exactly what I saw. I said, do we have enough space for movement for all these people with the fast food chain sitting there?
Okay. Well, one quick thought, don't forget the resolution is for rezoning. Right. It's not the site plan, so.
But it is a conditional rezoning that provides this site plan as an exhibit and the number of units that were being built.
Right, I mean, this is different than the other conditional rezoning. This one is actually conditioned upon the site plan.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Mr. Faison.
But the rezoning runs to the EP strip. And the development is a by right development. Did I hear that earlier?
Once rezoned, yes.
Just for the EP.
So I thought the EP was an amenity, was additional parking. So again, I thought what was said earlier was that even absent the rezoning, that the development was a by right development.
So the site plan that came before Planning Commission November 2019 was by right. The EP district does not allow parking.
Understood.
So it's being proposed to be rezoned to allow that parking. Once that, if it is conditionally rezoned, that would then become Big Beaver, which also permits parking as part of this development.
Just to reiterate that point, the applicant came before with a development that was by right, other than the guest parking in the EP. Planning Commission at that time said, well, what do you think about coming back with EP rezoning as part of it? That's what they're coming back for it with. If the EP zoning was, if it was not rezoned, the EP zoning was not rezoned, this did not go forward from council, in theory, the applicant could come back with a same layout and development, just basically essentially removing the guest parking, and that would be essentially a by right development for the Planning Commission to consider.
That was my question.
That's,
thank you. And the other,
I'm glad you clarified that. That's important.
One follow-up, just, the ingress and the egress and the Taco Bell. Has there been any kind of traffic or parking study that kind of objectively analyzes that, or would there be as part of the approval process for this?
There has not been, and as indicated, this is a preliminary site plan that's a condition of approval and kind of attached to the rezoning. Again, this is the first I've heard of a traffic issue. The resident didn't indicate it was at 2 o'clock in the morning, but that's neither here nor there. We could study it and see if there's, what information we have and if we have any data, maybe the Troy Police Department or what have you, that indicates that there's an issue here. Again, it's the first I've heard of it.
Okay. So again, my question was, in our normal course, would that be an assessment that we would do?
It's case-by-case basis, and what we do is it was not required when this was submitted. Engineering did not say we should have some type of a study for this number of units. The challenge we have is the die has been cast here. The access to this property is provided where it's provided, and we're in a way we're kind of stuck with it because that's the access. It's that panhandle provides access to the back of the property. It was created, approximately 20 years ago. Now, does that mean there can't be design considerations that make it safer and better? No, we can certainly look at it.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Well, my thought is if we deny the rezoning and the council agrees with us and they deny it, can this development still go through without the guest parking?
Well,
I'm sorry. There's no ordinance requirement to have guest parking.
Right.
Planning Commission has typically always either strongly encouraged it or required it in some form. And so I don't know what would come back if this was denied. My thought would be they would come back either without guest parking or they would try to put guest parking somewhere within the site of what's now the neighborhood node zone parcel, and the EP zoning would stay that long strip of nothing.
Yep. And hopefully maintained. Would there be any recourse for the city to have that property maintained at this point without going into a rezoning?
Well, again, the code enforcement will investigate any complaint. If any of the neighbors here present this evening want to complain to us about tall grass and weeds, it was indicated it's kind of at the back, so it's not visible from the right-of-way. Let us know, and we'll investigate to the best of our ability, and we'll enforce and make sure the grass is cut or the weeds are cut. We rely on our 80,000 plus residents to be eyes on the street and to let us know when there's violations, and we investigate all of them.
So, go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
Not to drag the questioning out, but if the developer were to come in and develop by right, with that EP zoning in place, are they required to do anything like put a berm in there or shrubbery to block the light coming from the cars or from the adjoining the units there?
Well, what is permitted in EP is additional landscaping, so they could put landscaping in there to block headlights. That's not...
They're not required to.
Kind of a tricky question. I would say that if I think it's actually, I don't think it's that tricky. If it could be demonstrated that there was turning movements that shown that shined headlights into abutting properties, the planning commission or city council could recommend that there be additional, actually, if it was by right, it would be the planning commission. It's getting late, I apologize. That they could put landscaping on EP as a buffer for this development.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Parakis.
So I just want to be clear that we understand what we're going to be voting on, because to me, I see it as two things. It's the rezoning, but it's also the site plan. So if we say no to the zoning, they still have to meet, they can't just leave and then by right means they go and build something and don't come back to us. Or we can approve the site plan tonight. But I guess my point is they still have to, even though it's by right, they still have to satisfy all the requirements. And so it's I guess it's a little bit strange that it's a two-pronged thing in one thing, but
Ms. Prax, I don't remember if you were on the commission when this came in.
I wasn't.
So we did a review of the site plan the first time, and it met all the requirements. And the only outstanding issue was the use of that EP zone property. For that reason, the Planning Commission at that time asked the applicant to come back with a conditional rezoning to rezone the EP to have guest parking. The time the applicant, I guess, could have said, okay, it's a permitted site plan that meets all the requirements. I'll just take off the guest parking and I will just build it as with just the EP, just the end portion of the development only. They didn't want to do it at that time, and so we did do a full review of the site plan previously, and it does meet all the requirements of the zoning ordinance, the neighborhood node portion of it.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Yeah, so I'd just like to kind of point out that by right, somebody could build a 4-story building on this site, because in this neighborhood node zoning. By right, there's a lot of different things that can be built here. And it's up to this body to decide what's appropriate for the use consistent with the zoning ordinance and the master plan. So when you say that it's in compliance within the broad standards of the form-based zoning. And the zoning ordinance gives us guidance as well as the master plan. And And I think we've gotten off track. And the neighbors, the citizens of Troy have told us that we've gotten off track by saying that they don't want to see these multifamily buildings built in this kind of density. And when the building form C says it's supposed to be compatible with higher density urban character, this isn't a higher density urban character. It's next to residential single-story buildings and single-story commercial buildings. I don't believe that this is a suitable development. I could go on about the building standards. We've talked about that before, but I don't think that staff at the city would like to talk about that right now. So it's my opinion that this is not suitable. It has issues even aside from the ones that I've raised with the traffic alone. I think is enough to say that you wouldn't approve this, knowing that that's a potential safety issue. It's a burden for the residences. It's a burden for the neighbors. It'd be a burden for Taco Bell to boot. For that reason, I would propose the following resolution. Resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that Neighborhood Node J and EP to Neighborhood Node J conditional rezoning request as per Section 16.04 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance, located on the west side of DeQuinder, north of Long Lake, within Section 12, being approximately 2.389 acres in size, be denied for the following reasons. The request does not comply with the master plan, including but not limited to its definition of transitional density. The conditions offered by the applicant do not reasonably protect the adjacent properties, and the rezoning and conditions offered would be incompatible with surrounding zoning and land use and do not comply with the zoning ordinance, including but not limited to building form.
Mr. Gutierrez, you know the process, so do we have a second on that resolution? Are we ready for a resolution yet? More we can second it and then have a discussion.
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion. Go ahead, Mr. Ron.
Quick question. I was there in the Planning Commission at that time, so I know I can maybe share some of these things we discussed at the time if anybody has any question. But my point is, the question is to Mr. Savidan. Recently, we approved the setback and height. That regulation is applied here or no? Because the application was submitted before that thing was passed.
So we have a resolution on the table. I've already answered that question. It does not apply in this case.
Because it was this is a return for this gentleman. So okay. So in that case, by right.
Mr. Roman, we have a resolution on the table that we need to discuss.
Okay.
So can we discuss the resolution that's been put forward by Mr. Rauch and seconded by Ms. Barakis?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on the resolution before a vote? Then a vote, please.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
No.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
No.
Mr. Lambert?
No.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
No.
You have 4 yeses, 4 noes.
So the motion carries?
No.
No.
I'm sorry. It dies. Sorry. So now, the next step is we need another resolution then on this item.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Sure.
So if we choose to go on the no side, which is we agree with Mr. Rausch's resolution, which I'm in agreement also, then what is the next thing that is going to happen? In the sense, if one of us says yes to this and moves this, then I understand the EP area is going to now have those parking spaces and the sidewalk, which I realized later on. If we go towards the no, that most of us are leaning, will it be a complete revamping of the site plan And will the applicant come back with some of the changes that we have discussed today?
So what happens next is Mr. Abatheria decides whether or not he moves forward to city council. This is a recommendation to city council. So city council, whether you approve it, you give a recommendation for approval or recommendation for denial, the next step is to go to city council.
Correct. Okay, yes, I remember that. Okay, thank you. Thank you for correcting me.
Okay, so that resolution failed, so do we have another resolution?
Can we have some discussion before we
Sure,
come
go
up
ahead.
with another? Because I like to share some of these things that we discussed at that time,
Go ahead.
So the idea is, by right, this proposal can build whatever is proposed here. So I don't think we can change anything. I believe at that time we discussed and we said that the conversion of the EP zone to neighborhood node would make this place better. We can have guest parking and all this. So I believe, this is a good proposal and we should go for it. Thank you.
Would you like to make a resolution on that?
I can try this time.
Okay, go ahead.
This is the one, right? Yeah. Okay. Resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that NNJ and EP to NNJ conditional rezoning request as per section 16.04 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the west side of DeQuinder, north of Long Lake, within section 12, being approximately 2.389 acres in size, be granted for these following reasons. The request complies with the master plan. The EP district does not include any significant natural features. The rezoning would permit greater flexibility in the use and development of the property. The conditions offered by the applicant reasonably protect the adjacent properties. The rezoning would be compatible with surrounding zoning and land use. The site can be adequately served with municipal water and sewer. Be it further resolved that the Planning Commission recommends the following site plan design considerations. 1. Submit photometric plans and fixture details. Address the engineering department's pedestrian connection comments. Provide site landscaping calculation. Provide floor plans and elevations.
You have a second on that?
Before I second it, is there anything else that we wanted in that resolution?
Consider, got to be careful here because it's got to be voluntarily conditioned, but consider concerns generated or concerns stated by residents related to headlight glare and traffic safety.
Would you like to include that?
Yes, consider residents' feedback on headlight glaring.
And traffic safety.
And traffic safety.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Lambert seconds it. Any discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Farakis.
Yeah, the only discussion I would say is that it's premised on the, I heard what you said, but it's premised on a different planning commission determining that the site plan complied with the master plan and all of that. And so I guess, just because it's by right, we got to be careful when we throw that term around. It doesn't mean anything goes. There's still standards that have to be met, and this is a different planning commission now. So I'm just pointing that out.
Anything else? Mr. Roush?
Yeah, in addition to the standards that I mentioned that aren't being complied with, the design standards in section 5.06 E1A require that the primary entrance be on a street. There's no primary entrance on a street. The elevations have shown us, the developer has shown us that the primary entrance is off the sidewalk in the center of that drawing there. And then if you look at section table 503B3, under lot access and circulations, it says driveways must access garages, if provided, integrated into buildings from the rear in an alley configuration. So according to this then, the buildings that face east and west, the driveways are accessing an alley, which contradicts the building design standards, which say the primary entrance has to be on a street. So you can't have the primary entrance in the rear of the property on an alley. So, you know, I'm sorry that this issue wasn't raised previously when you've looked at a townhouse development, but there's one in front of you, and it can't be any clearer when you read those two sections. And if you want me to, if you want, we can put them up on the screen and see them so you can read them for yourself. Or you could take my word for it when I give you the quotes. So I don't know how in good judgment, we as planning commissioners, who are supposed to follow the zoning ordinance, can vote in favor and recommend that our city council approve something that is clearly wrong in a number of ways, including the transitional issues that we're supposed to be making a judgment on between four-story buildings and single-family residences. Why aren't we allowing duplexes, quads, attached residential, bungalow court, something that isn't 3 stories tall and jammed in here? If we were to follow the ordinance as it relates to primary entrance and the alleys, you'd cut down the density by probably half. And that's why it was, I'm sure, in the ordinance to begin with.
Do you have any comment from staff on that? None? Okay. Mr. Lambert.
Just to make sure, and I want to follow up on Commissioner Roush's question to the Assistant City Attorney, is our resolution in compliance with the city zoning ordinance?
So I'm not going to take an opinion on what Mr. Rock is saying, but this is conditional rezoning. So anything goes. We're approving one of the conditions that Mr. Evertheri's site plan are offering are baked into what he's proposing. So I understand what Mr. Rock is saying, and maybe that applies if we were considering this as a by right, but this is conditional rezoning. So we can make amendments based on the conditions that he's offering to what is approved.
Okay, thank you. One clarification. So.
Yep. Any other thoughts? Seeing none, we've got a motion and a second, and we'll go to the vote.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
No.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
No.
Ms. Parakis?
No.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
No.
You have 4 yeses, 4 noes.
We've got 8.
Yeah, it would, the recommendation is you're at a stalemate.
Yeah, stalemate.
It goes before city council as 4-4 on 2 different resolutions. It moves on.
Yeah.
It doesn't pass.
It doesn't pass.
The planning commission has spoken. It doesn't have to,
Doesn't have to have a full positive vote one way or the
the
other.
recommendation is 4-4.
Got it. Okay. There you go. Thank you for stopping by, Mr. Abbott. All right. And thank you for the residents that show up and stay at this late. Okay, next item on our agenda is public comments for items on tonight's current agenda. Seeing that our audience is gone, we'll go on to the next item, which is Planning Commission comment. I'll just start at this end. Mr. Faison, nothing?
Nothing?
I'm good.
Nothing.
Nothing.
I'm sorry, I'll take just a second. Mr. Savadan had sent us all an email telling us about that he could not put an item on the agenda and that he would still be willing to address. I know now is not the time to address that, but will that be moved to the next, are we all in agreement that it will be moved to the next? Thank you. Yeah, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay. And I have nothing, so we're adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.